Hello, and in today's video we are doing an FPL 2023 to 24 Game Week 1 tier list. That's right, it's a new season, new dreams. I am FPL Yellow Army Roberto, and today we're going to be doing a tier list. This was a great idea, so I did put out a tweet saying, any ideas for content ahead of the Game Week 1 deadline other than my Game Week 1 selection video, which you will be able to catch ahead of that Friday deadline this week of 6:30 p.m. On the Friday, of course, I will be at Fantasy Football Fest, which is always a fantastic occasion. Amazing to see the FPL community in the flesh. They're such a lovely bunch of people, and it's such great fun every single year. There'll be FPL Juice there. Obviously, not always everyone from FPL Juice. For instance, Nick won't be there, but Guest the Player will be there. So plenty of great FPL Juice people there, but also so many other people in the FPL community. You've got FPL Family, you've got FPL Focal, you've got FPL Harry, you've got Gianni Bitici, you've got Ed, who's obviously, helping out with Fest as well, Mark Southerns, and they'll be doing a live edition of FPL Black Box, which is always so entertaining to watch. There'll be the comedian there, Lloyd Griffith. He's always hilarious. You've got basically a bundle of fun at Fantasy Football Fest. And although some people like Kelly Summers and Nick from FPL Juice won't be there, it will still be a fantastic occasion. And I just cannot wait to lock in my Game Week 1 team. Disclosure, ahead of that Game Week 1 team selection video, things will change, I'm afraid. Because I'll do a pre-recorded video to come and drop at the 6:30 p.m. deadline on my channel. But obviously, we'll get team news, hopefully a bit of leaked early team news for that Burnley Man City game from a bit of, FPL accounts on Twitter like FPL, Team News and Ticks and Sam, for instance. There's a few accounts that will hopefully provide that Man City leaked news. So depending on that, so for instance, if Phil Foden is starting, if Grealish or Alvarez are starting, then that will dictate my transfers. But basically, I did show you my draft in a recent video. That draft has slightly adapted, but what I will say is, as of now, it's the Monday before the Friday deadline, and of the 15 players in my squad, 13 of them are locked in. Yes, I'm pretty sure it's about 13. It might be 12, but it's pretty much 12, 13. And then a couple spaces are still to be decided based on team news, based on discussions I have with the FPL community. So I'll try and do my best to predict what I'll go for before the deadline. But as I say, depending on team news, it could well adapt. But we'll make sure we cover my Game Week 1 first final team in my FPL Game Week 1 review that I do after the weekend's action. But yeah, today we are going to be rating pretty much all of the FPL assets that we're going to be interested in ahead of this new season. I just thought it's a really good idea. So thank you for replying to that tweet with FPL content ideas. No FPL, a great account I follow on Instagram and Twitter. He always has really interesting posts and discussions. So yeah, really rate you guy and appreciate the idea. And yeah, we're just going to get straight into it really. So yeah, this is a big upcoming FPL season. It's actually my 6th FPL campaign, 23-24. I started in the 18-19 season. 18-19 season, I had quite a bad rank, to be honest. No, it was the first season ever playing, didn't really know the rules, that kind of thing. So I just kind of went into it thinking, let's just have a bit of fun, take loads of hits, and I ended up finishing 3,391,639. Then the 1920 season, of course, that was the COVID season. So really only had one real season that was normal in 18-19. But hopefully this should be as much as possible back to a normal season without COVID, the Queen dying, or, an alien invasion, or, something like this to disrupt the matches. So, yeah, 1920 season, it was a struggle, to be honest, because that was obviously when lockdown came in, so the season got paused. And after the kind of when the lockdown started and then you had Project Restart, I kind of did take a lot of hits. And it does actually show on my FPL history an incorrect rank. So just as a disclosure, I had an account which I borrowed my dad's email, I'll admit, before I signed up with my actual email the following season. I had used his email just to kind of make things easier. And basically, I finished on an overall rank of, I can't quite remember the number. Let me just get it for you people. Yeah, that was it. So my overall rank in the 1920 season was 1,834,861 with a total points of 2,006. But basically what happened is, as I say, I did it on my dad's email, but then obviously when my dad later then decided to use that email, that rank history got wiped because it was on a different account. So, and now my dad has a different email. So basically that that rank, it can't be found anywhere, unfortunately. Although I've got the screenshots to prove it, it was wiped when I had to change my email, obviously, because that wasn't my email anymore. So basically it says on my account that I finished 7 million. Now I did actually make, as I said, I got a bit bored in lockdown, made a second team just for the fun of it, where I was taking hits every week, but I was just intrigued to see if I could do it like a post-lockdown team and see if it did well. As I said, I didn't take it seriously, took loads of hits, and didn't get many points. I ended up finishing on 504 points in that later stage of the season, and of course that explains the 7 million rank. So just ignore that, but I did finish of that overall rank of 1,834,861. And then kind of from the 2020 to 21 season, after that COVID year, I was like, come on, it was a bit of fun, but let's get serious now. Let's actually start playing this properly. So for the first time, I really thought about not taking hits recklessly and made transfers that made sense. And I had a really good season in 20 to 21. I finished 267k, which was more than half of my previous 1 million rank. So yeah, it was unbelievable, really. 267,782 in that 20 to 21 season. Then the season after that, I finished, again, more than half better than my rank, because I got 109,677, and that was 2,498 points. Of course, you'd have seen that on my channel, the 21-22 season. The content is all there in a playlist if you want to go back and watch it. So 109k then. And then last season, we went up another gear. We had a really good season, finishing 18,795. So top 19k. What a season in 22-23. But 23-24 is just around the corner this Friday. So I'll help you out, and I'll try and help myself out by ranking all of these interesting FPL picks. And this is my tier list. So the way it works, pretty simple really. If they're in the top column, I think they're essential. Your likes of a certain Norwegian, which we'll get onto. The great pick, that's basically saying they're a really good option. They're not necessarily 100% essential, but I would strongly advise that they're in your thoughts and they're possibly in your team. Good pick. This is the sort of player where I think they aren't essential, or they're not going to be necessarily amazing, but they will kind of tick along nicely, get you some points. They're a decent option to bring in for sure. Optional pick. This one I'm indifferent towards this player. I'm not that fussed either way. If you want to go for them, feel free, but I'm just not that inclined either way. So just do what you want to do with them. And then bad pick. This is ones you should definitely avoid bringing in. I would not recommend these players for your FPL team in 23-24. So we're going to start off with a bit of a troll of FPL in recent years, Luca Dean from Aston Villa. Now, for me, this goes in optional. The reason he's not a bad pick, as much as he has been a troll through the years, is that we do know that Aston Villa defensively have got a lot better under Unai Emery. And obviously, Europa League football, or European football, I should say, in the Europa Conference League is going to be a factor for Aston Villa this year. Now, ultimately, Luca Dean, because of that, will get some minutes, right? It's not that he's guaranteed to get benched. Alex Moreno was very good last year, and Matty Cash obviously didn't get the minutes that they'd hoped. But Aston Villa obviously have signed other defenders like Pau Torres, so we could see, for instance, Konza go in at right back, Mings and Torres play, or maybe someone else like Pau Torres partnering another of the centre-backs. So Luca Dean, will he play? Probably most of the time. And admittedly, he is an FPL troll. He picks up weird yellow cards and sometimes crazy own goals, but generally, the reason he's been an FPL asset at times is because he's on set pieces. He took free kicks last season for Aston Villa, scored a wonderful one at home to Manchester United, and I think he's got that in his locker. Now, as I said, he's a bit of a troll, so just tread with caution, but when he's good, he is really good, so he's optional in my view. Moving on to the next one, Sam Johnston for Crystal Palace. Now, he's one of the good 4.5 goalkeeper options. Good fixtures kind of for Crystal Palace. They're not amazing, but just factor in that they have got Arsenal in game week 2. But generally, I think Johnston is a reliable pick. Now, obviously, last season we were unsure who was going to be the starting goalkeeper, but it was at the start of the season Vicente Guaita, and then when he got injured for the last kind of stage of the season, Johnston came in, and to be honest, he did quite well, got a lot of FPL save points, did have a bit of a nightmare in that away trip to Wolves, but that was just a one-off, and obviously, did do really well in that double game week, the blank game week 32 that a lot of people brought in Johnston on their free hits. So I think there's potential for save points here. Crystal Palace do absorb a lot of shots. The only thing I will say with Crystal Palace is defensively they're not perfect, and maybe you want to go for a slightly better defence when you're picking your goalkeeper, but I'll just say that he's a good pick. He's not great, he's not one of the best goalkeepers you can pick in the game, but he's certainly not a bad option. Now, the next one is Raul Jimenez. Now, didn't think I'd be talking about him. I thought I'd probably be seeing him leave the Premier League this upcoming campaign, but he has left Wolves after the last couple of seasons have been quite cagey, to be honest, quite dodgy for him after what was a really unfortunate career, possibly, career ending, but it wasn't quite injury to the skull in that game at the Emirates a few seasons back. And ultimately, since then, he's never really been the same. Not scored the goals that he was scoring volumes of after that first FPL season with Wolves in the 18-19 season. So he has absolutely got the ability to be gold dust when he's on form. But he's going to a new Fulham team that, obviously Mitrovic looks like he's not going to play again. So that's a big role to fill. Jimenez, we know he's got FPL history, but has he got the recent form to then do well and click in his Fulham side? We just don't know. It's a bit of an unknown. So for me, I'm going to put it in optional pick because right now I'm not really interested in him, but he could come really good. And for 5.5 million, he could be a bargain after not a good couple of last years. That explains his price drop. So yeah, could be a good one, but optional in my view. The next one we've got is Raheem Sterling. Now this certainly could be a Rashford from the 22-23 season in terms of pricing. It could be a really cheap way into that Chelsea attack because in the past Sterling's always been a massive premium option in the 10 millions, 11 millions, etc. But now priced at a crazy 7 million because of the last season. He didn't have a great campaign, it's got to be said, and the last kind of season at City wasn't brilliant either. But he did get some goals for Chelsea last year, and Chelsea now, under Pochettino, they'll be looking to hit the reset button and go again. And to be honest, I don't love him when I talk about some of the other Chelsea attackers, but he's a wait and see. He could well be a great pick, but for now, I'm going to put him in good pick. I think he's only not an optional because of the price. It's a nice, cheap price, so you can go to other players like 6.5 midfielders. So it's not the end of the world if it doesn't go off, and if he doesn't get the form that we want him to, we can always move down. But for that value, for that price, he could well be a good pick. Now, next up, we've got Luke Shaw. For me, Luke Shaw goes into great pick straight away. Now, a lot of the time with Luke Shaw in FPL, we haven't quite got what we were hoping for in terms of sometimes we think, let's get those massive hauls. He did it a couple times last season, that home game against Bournemouth. I'm pretty sure scored in that game, and he did well, I think, at home to Forest as well, if I remember rightly. But generally, he doesn't come with these big hauls of these goals or these assists all the time. He chips away with a few points here and there. Loves some bonus points, it's got to be said. And was playing a centre-back at times last season, which obviously is not great for his FPL appeal. But generally, I think Luke Shaw is still a very solid option. The thing that makes him a little less appealing is the arrival of Andre Onana, who, to be honest, we know that Onana's going to play, and he saves that 0.5 million. He's going to probably get as many bonus points, if not more, as Luke Shaw because of the fact that Onana's really good with his feet. So that's completed passes, good for the bonus points, and he's really good with his reflexes, makes a lot of saves. We'll get to Onana in a bit. But generally, I think that's why people are opting for Onana, and they don't want to double up on that United defence as good as it was last season. 17 clean sheets. Can they repeat that? Look, they'll be solid up there, but it's going to be hard to be amazing, so doubling up is a bit of a risky strategy in defence. But Luke Shaw, certainly not a bad pick. Really, really good option if you want him in your FPL teams. Next up, we've got Sheffield United's John Egan. Now, of course, a lot of people will remember him from that first Sheffield United 1920 Lundstrom season, and he was a decent asset to own at times because he sometimes had set-piece threat from Sheffield United's team and some headers. Sometimes he scored. I remember in that 20-21 opening day at home to Wolves with a towering header. I'm pretty sure John Egan was the man. So look, he certainly does have form. He has history, but he didn't get many goals for Sheffield United in the Championship last season, and I'm not sure how much of an attacking threat he is these days. But he could be a solid pick. Let's not forget this guy has been good in the past, and it's crazy to think there are so many 4.0 options in FPL this season. And at the time of recording, there could be more if we see someone like Branthwaite or Jed Spence move to a Premier League club that plays for them. But generally, I think John Egan could be a decent shout. He is 4.5, so he's not far off that kind of Bulldog 4.0 price. But he is definitely nailed to start, I think. As far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure the two centre-backs are Ahmed Hodzic and Egan. I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, Sheffield United fans. But generally, I think he's a good option, but not an amazing option. So Sheffield United, obviously a bit of a new entity. We know that they were decent in that last 19-20 season. They were pretty poor in 2021. Let's wait and see how good their defence will be this time around before we commit with a 4.5 that we just don't know if he's going to get the attack returns we want. So for that reason, he's going to go in optional. But I don't think he's an awful pick, because Sheffield United's fixtures to start are quite nice. Palace at home is not a bad fixture. And Forest away is also very good in Game Week 2. Okay, moving on to Solly March. Now for me, Solly March is going to go in good pick. Now, he's not in great because I still feel that he did underperform at times last season, especially in the latter stages of the season, when he had little bursts of scoring. Did really well. I remember that home Liverpool game, scored some bangers and definitely did have a great FPL season. Compared to what we've known of Solly March in recent years, he really upped his goals. But when you factor in the fact that Europa League will be on the horizon for Brighton and there's possible rotation, we did see Solly March come off a few times early, and much earlier than the likes of Kaoru Mitoma and other players in that Brighton attack. So he's not a bad option, definitely, at 6.5. He's one of the standout 6.5 midfielders with first three fixtures, really, really nice for Brighton. Luton at home, Wolves away, and I think they've also got West Ham at home to start the season. So certainly a good asset. But I do slightly prefer Mitoma just for nailed minutes, and generally I think he's not that much of an attacking player. He's more of a playmaker, but he could get the odd goal here or there. Now, next up is Kepa Arrizabalaga, and to me, this goes in bad pick. As harsh as this sounds, he did have a good FPL season last year, especially post-World Cup, with him being at 4.5, nice price. He did really get those save points, and he was quite a good asset to own. But this season, he comes in at 5.0, and I just think there are better 5.0 goalkeepers in the game, and even 4.5s are better. But this year, he does face competition with Robert Sanchez for a number one spot at Chelsea. Now, who knows who's going to be the starter, but that's not the point. We just don't know who's going to start, and it's a bit too uncertain. With a new manager coming in Pochettino, who will Pochettino favour? We just do not know. And I think, as I say, a bit too pricey. Chelsea's fixtures also, to start off with, aren't brilliant. They've got Liverpool and West Ham in the first two. So I just don't love this pick, to be honest. And that's why he's going a bad pick. I mean, look, if you really are a Chelsea fan, you think he'll start, he could maybe switch into optional. But for me, for that value, he's a bad pick. Now we've got a next one coming up. It is Adam Webster for Brighton. Now, 4.5 defender for the Brighton. Now, I do think that Adam Webster has been a slightly worse FPL asset in the last couple of years. Recently, he's just not been getting those attacking returns that he did in, a few seasons back. So he's not as attractive. And is he as nailed as before? Because, Levi Colwill was really good last season. That's why he didn't get as many minutes. But now Colwill's gone to Chelsea. You think, maybe Webster will start. But not necessarily, because they've now signed someone called Igor. So Webster is a decent option, but I just don't know how nailed he is for minutes. And also, Brighton's fixtures, when they're not great for the first, after Game Week 3, you want really someone that's going to get those attacking returns to maybe counteract the bad fixtures. But I don't think Webster has many of those. So for that reason, he's going to go in optional pick. As I said, with Brighton's defence, they're not brilliant. I mean, they're more focused on attacking. But with the lack of assurances in terms of minutes and attacking returns, he's going in optional. But as I say, he could well start, and he's got good fixtures to start, so he doesn't quite qualify as bad, just not that much of a good pick, in my opinion. Next up, we got Jordan Pickford, and I'm going to be putting him in good pick. Not quite great pick. I'm not that high on Jordan Pickford. I was, to be honest, when the game first launched, because I just saw Everton's really nice fixtures. and ultimately he got a lot of save points last year. But for me, Pickford, when I compare him to now who's come into the game, Andre Onana, and maybe even Ramsdale at Arsenal, I just don't love it because Everton defensively are still a bit of a shambles. Now, maybe Sean Dyche with the full pre-season will get them playing better and get more save points. And in the past, that's what 4.5 goalies have often done. They get those save points and they get the odd clean sheet here and there, which is all you need for that value goalkeeper pick. So I think of the 4.5s, he's definitely up there as the best one. So that's why he's still a very good pick, but not quite great enough for me to put him there. But certainly an option to consider with the nice fixtures for the first 7 or 8 weeks of the FPL season. Next up, we've got Joel Veltman. For me, he's going in the same row as Adam Webster because I just don't know how nailed Veltman is. Now, of course, Veltman is possibly the right-back starter last season. It was a bit of a mishmash because we had at times Pascal Gross fitting in at right back. Even Caicedo went there at times to work out the numbers and bulk up that defence with there's some injuries to the likes of Veltman and Lamptey. Of course, Lamptey's often always injured, but Veltman is still a decent asset when he's starting. He sometimes gets some attack and returns, some assists, but as I said, I'm not too keen on him just for minutes. We don't quite know if he's going to play every single game, and also there could well be rotation there with Lamptey, but also I prefer another fullback from Brighton, and he's only 0.5 more, so I think it's just worth getting the extra money to get this guy. But Veltman, on the other hand, I think is optional. Not a terrible pick, I'd say, with Brighton's fixtures, and Veltman's got some attacking threat, but not brilliant. Okay, next up, we've got Johnny Castro Otto. Now, Johnny actually had quite a good season in FPL last year. I owned him at one point in the season. He did quite well for me, got some bonus points, got some clean sheets, but that was really all it went to. Later on in the season, he actually picked up a couple of goals, which was really nice to see. One of them, an absolute wonder goal against Leeds at home. But what do I think about Johnny in 23-24? For me, he is a bad pick. The reason for that is Wolves, I just don't know who's going to be starting for their fullbacks. Now, they have brought in Matt Doherty. He could well be an interesting FPL pick. But to start the season, I think Wolves' fixtures are quite horrible. So I wouldn't really want to be having a nailed, we don't know who's nailed. And we also don't want to be having to start a Wolves defender week in, week out in our teams because of how bad those fixtures are. So he could well be decent value later on in the season. We just don't quite know if he's going to start. But as I said, he's got some attacking threat. He could be okay. But for now, I think he's a bad pick just because of those fixtures. And just because, Ryan at Nori could easily play. We just do not know who the starter is in that position for Wolves. But to be honest, coming in at 4.5, he could make a mockery of that price. But at the moment, he's been bad pick. Then we've got Jack Grealish. Now, this will split the crowd, I think. But I'm going to put him in great pick. Now, it's very tempting to put him in good pick because at times last season, he was very frustrating to own as an FPL asset. But I still feel he's a great option just because when are we going to get a nailed City midfielder? Not often, right? And I know that you'll say, oh, Rodri, right? But he's not an FPL asset. He pops up with the odd goal here or there, but he's a waste of a Man City spot. Now, I do acknowledge that on his day, Phil Foden is much more explosive and gets more attacking positions than Jack Grealish. And Jack Grealish is just kind of one of those players. He wins a lot of fouls. He does a lot of the kind of running down the wing and a lot of the work off the ball. But as an FPL asset, he's not exactly exploded into life at Man City. He was probably a bit better in his time at Aston Villa. So I admit, it's not a perfect Jack Grealish, but it's better to be playing and have a chance of goals, which he did get, to be honest, around game week 30 of last season. He went on a little run of getting goals. Maybe if he can just maintain that this season, he could be a really great pick. So that's why, for me, he's just about got in there ahead of the other good picks. But to be honest, he could well be a little bit lower in the good picks. So it's kind of a tough one. But just because we know that Grealish is likely to play, and that makes it better than some of the other assets at City, like Foden, who is it's a lottery if he's going to start, and Alvarez the same thing. If Kevin De Bruyne is going to start, we just don't know who's going to fit in alongside Haaland, and I think Grealish is pretty sure to start. So that's why he's slightly better. But to be honest, he does need to get more FPL attacking returns for him to justify that selection. Now, next up, I've gone with Leandro Trossard. Now, for me, I think this is a good pick. The reason I say good pick is because as tempting as he could be at the start of this FPL season with the news that Gabriel Jesus will be out for a few weeks with a knee injury, So therefore, we could well see Leandro Trossard, who is a very nice price of 7 million, go in and start for the Arsenal in the first few games. Yes, he could be brilliant, and he's played well at times for Arsenal after his move from Brighton last season. However, I'm just not sure how much of a long-term pick he will be good for. So he could well be, you bring him in, and then a few weeks down the line, when Jesus comes back, he could well share minutes with Martinelli. Now, of course, Trossard did score in the Community Shield, as did Cole Palmer. Maybe Cole Palmer will be one we have to look at for Man City. But Trossard did play well in the Community Shield, and Arsenal did get the victory on penalties after that 1-1 draw. But whether or not Trossard is a good asset throughout the whole season, we'll just have to wait and see. But he's certainly not a bad pick. We know he can score goals, and we know he can offer stuff off the bench for Gabriel Martinelli to kind of come off and him to provide that impact. So for me, I think he'll start probably the first few games. Whether or not it's longer, we'll have to wait and see. But he could certainly be a good FPL pick, because got great fixtures, Arsenal. The first three, we've got obviously that first Forest game, going to be goals, you'd hope. Then Crystal Palace and Fulham, very, very nice. Next up is, for me, one of the best in FPL. But he's not quite essential this season in my view, and that's Mohamed Salah. Now, of course, I know how good FPL Mohamed Salah is. He has been an absolute staple of our teams for, 5-6 seasons now? He's just been an absolute icon of the game. An icon of this game. Look, we're not doubting that Salah will score points, but a lot of people are going to take him out at the start of Game Week 1, not own him, because it's just really hard to fit him in when we've got Erling Haaland, who we pretty much have to have, and he comes in at 14 million, which is pricey, of course, but it's worth every penny with how good Erling Haaland is as an FPL asset. Now, Mo Salah did have a slightly worse season than his standards. Of course, his standards are so high, but it was slightly worse season last year because they had to factor in Darwin Núñez into their attack. That meant Salah was pushed out a little bit wider. He wasn't as central in their attack, and he wasn't getting all the goals. He was sometimes assisting, sometimes being unselfish, and sometimes we are surprised by that because Salah's known as being a greedy FPL pick that's on penalties, always shoots when he's on the ball. But that's not the case now because Liverpool have had to transform under Klopp. So, yes, he's a fantastic asset. And yes, he can get those hauls. Yes, he's a great captaincy option, for sure. But when Erling Haaland is in town, it makes it more difficult to justify. As much as 12.5 is a fair price, he's gone down from 13 from last season, which is a good decision. As much as that's a fair price for him, and I would easily pay that, our Haaland in there as well makes it difficult. I mean, you could have a draft with Haaland and Salah, but spending that much on Salah when it's very possible we could just perma-captain Erling Haaland every single week because of how good he is, means that we lose some of the value we get from Salah when we often go to pick him for captaincy. If we're not going to captain him, 12.5 is a lot of money to spend. And there are so many good mid-price midfielders in this FPL season. So it's very tempting to have a draft with Salah and Haaland and just not captain Salah. That is very tempting. But when I want to have a stronger squad depth, it's not quite worth it in my view. But I do definitely not go against having Salah in your team. He's still a great pick. As I say, not quite essential as Haaland is in my view because of that value you can get for other midfielders. And of course, there's going to be a point when Salah's exploding in the game and everyone's going to scramble, taking wildcard, taking -8s to get him in. And we'll just have to bite the bullet when that happens. But if you do start with him and you don't go for Erling Haaland, then good luck, you're going to need it. But generally, if you do start with him alongside Haaland, he could well be a really powerful differential. And when have we ever said that about Mo Salah? So, yeah, really great pick. Then it's Abdoulaye Doucouré. And by the way, with Salah, just quickly, I do believe he'll stay on penalties, even though McAllister took them last season for Brighton. I think Salah is, as I said, he's still quite greedy, and he still will be on them, because Klopp has said that after he missed a few and he scored a few after that, he is the man for the pens. Then we've got Abdoulaye Doucouré. Bit of a differential, this one, to be honest. Doucouré comes in this season at quite a nice price of 5.5 million. Now, the way I look at it is, you don't really want to be going for this kind of guy every single week, but maybe the Watford bias is kicking in, I'm not sure. But for me, he is one of Everton's best FPL assets, just because he does pop up with some goals from time to time. It's not massively regular, but it is, occasional. So for 5.5 midfielders, they're not that many choice. And to be honest, a lot of midfielders that aren't that nailed. Your likes of Julio Enciso, who could well get some minutes taken off him because of Europa League football. You've also got players like Andreas Pereira, who, to be honest, could be a decent option. We'll get onto him, but will he have as good of a season? We have to wait and see. He's got some injuries from last season, and the 5.5s, there's just not a lot of options, right? Because generally 6.5s are where it's at, and then there's some better ones around 8 million, 9 million. But for me, Doucouré is still a decent option. As I said, very differential, 0.3% owned, and Everton's fixtures to start the season are really, really nice. But to me, he's still not quite an explosive FPL asset enough for me to put him in good pick. So he's going in optional, but I think he's going to go at the front of optional because I think on his day, he can haul big. And we saw it actually on the final day. Goal against Bournemouth. He scored really well away to Brighton in that really amazing scoreline. So he could get the attacking returns. It's just he is known for being a bit more of a workhouse in the midfield. So watch out for that. But still, interesting differential. Then we've got Robertson. Now, for me, Robertson's appeal is just not as high as it used to be in FPL previous seasons. Because in this new system that Liverpool have got with their inverted fullback, Trent Alexander-Arnold kind of playing in that midfield, it's not ideal, right? Because Robertson is still having to push back in that defence, stay defence, and keep that way because he's not bombing forward as much as he used to. The Liverpool had to sort out that defence. They weren't great last season, and Robertson didn't get as many attacking returns last season as he can do. So even though he's taken a big price drop at 6.5, I still feel it's worth paying the extra 1.5 and getting Trent because Trent is just so good at the end of the day. So Robertson still could well provide value if Trent isn't getting attacking returns and Robertson is later on in the season. I could well go for him at 6.5. It's a bit of a nice price drop. But for me, even though he's an interesting asset, he is differential at just 3.8% ownership. I'm just not that confident of attacking returns in the current Liverpool system. And for that 6.5 money, we need some chance of attacking returns. So for me, he's not quite a bad pick, but I also don't think he's a very good pick. So I'm putting him in optional, but right at the top of optional because, of course, we know his FPL history is very good indeed. Now, next up, we've got Bruno Fernandes. For me, he's going in great pick. The reason he's doing that is because that price tag of 8.5, it just makes a lot of sense. He's saving a lot of money for your other midfielders, like, for instance, Mo Salah, and yet although we didn't have the best of his FPL seasons last year, still 176 points is very a solid return. And he's the main creator of that United team. He's going to play every game. He's nailed. He's probably, most likely, although Rashford could share some, he's probably on penalties. And at 8.5, that is just a mockery of a price. You've just got to make advantage of that. And as much as Rashford is probably the better FPL option, I think with much as there's so many choices of midfielders in that, you could just well go for Bruno on his own and just hope that Rashford doesn't do as well as him. But, ultimately, he's a very tempting option for that price. United's fixtures, quite nice to start the season. At home to Forest in Game Week 3. At home to Wolves in Game Week 1. Some nice fixtures there. So, could well be worth the price and is a very interesting option. Looking up the next one, it's Tyrone Mings at 4.5 million. I mean, I was a bit surprised he came in at 4.5 after quite a good FPL season last year. He did get the odd attacking return, but generally racked up so many bonus points for that Villa defence, which kept a lot of clean sheets. So yeah, it's a bit of a cheat code, really, this one. And he's a nice price, but I'm not loving Aston Villa's fixtures, especially that away Newcastle trip. And maybe you could go with Mings, but with Pau Torres coming in, will we know Mings starts every week? Possibly, but it's not nailed on to be the case. He does get a lot of bonus points. He's a decent option, but I'm not quite putting him in a great pick. So he's going into good, but certainly could be a good value asset later in the season if we know he's starting and if Villa's fixtures get a bit more consistent. Because they've got Liverpool in Game Week 4, they've got Newcastle in Game Week 1. It's a bit up and down, but generally he could be a good FPL pick later down the line. Now, next up, we've got the new goalkeeper for Brentford, Mark Flecken. Now, a lot of people were really excited about this guy after David Raya got the most FPL points of any goalkeeper last year. People are thinking Brentford defensively, they're really good. It's going to be a really good option to get this guy, Mark Flecken, at 4.5. But we have looked in pre-season. Brentford have not been defensively brilliant. And of course, David Raya is well and likely going to be leaving. Hasn't left yet, but we have to wait and see if he does join someone. But ultimately, if he stays, then this does make Flecken a bit of a null and void option, right? So we have to wait and see with Raya. It's a bit of a asterisk, this one. But I think, generally, I do think Flecken will be the number one. I think Raya probably will leave. But even then, as much as Brentford's fixtures are quite nice to start the season, I think Brentford defensively, they'll have their moments. They'll have some good fixtures. But with a new goalkeeper coming into the league, that we're just not sure how Brentford will do with this guy. And whether or not he'll be proven at this level, I'm just not that loving it. So he's one of the decent FPL 4.5 options, but until we know what's going on with Raya, for me, he's an optional pick. He's not quite a good pick like Sam Johnston, because at least we've seen pre-season, we're pretty confident Johnston will be number one. We don't know that's the case for Mark Flecken, but if Raya does leave, he could well go up to good pick for sure. Moving on, Andreas Pereira. Now, we know how good of a cheat code this guy was last season. At 4.5, he was starting in the game as a Man United player, then obviously did get the move to Fulham, and he was probably the best bargain midfielder in the game last year. But at a bit more of an expensive price of 5.5, for me, he is a bad pick. Because, yes, he can get the odd attack and return here and there, but I think next season, we'll have to see how he does with Jimenez there as well. But when there's so many good midfielders, I think a 5 in midfield is very optimal, and therefore a 5.5 midfielder in that midfield, when you're not going to want to start Andreas every week, I just don't think there's much value going for him. Unless you're having a 4-4-2, maybe you could go there. But I think when you're in a 4-4-2, you kind of want your budget midfielder to be a 5 million midfielder or a 4.5. But 5.5 for me is just a bit too expensive. Let's wait and see if he is on penalties as well, because Jimenez is now coming in. Will he take them off them? We have to wait and see. But for me, with Fulham's fixtures as well, which aren't brilliant, I'm just not loving it. I mean, I don't mind Jimenez because we know he's got a potential, explosiveness. Will Andreas be able to keep it up? I'm not sure, but we'll have to wait and see. But for now, I'm just not loving that price for Andreas Pereira. Next up, Carlton Morris. Now, a lot of Luton players. For me, it's just a wait and see, because we don't know how they'll get on. Will they take to the Premier League like a duck to water, or will they stink it out? We just have to wait and see. But Carlton Morris certainly was their talisman last season. 20 goals, I think it was, in the Championship, and starts a lot of games. It's pretty nailed. And at 5.5, he could be a really good budget option. And I guess the difference with him and someone like João Pedro could be a really good option for Brighton if he starts. And he could well be on penalties, as he's taken this year. But I think Carlton Morris, as much as it's a bit murky with the penalties at Luton, I think he'll take them for Luton. Luton's fixtures are actually quite decent to start the season, but remember that in game week 2 they will be blanking, so that does put me off Carlton Morris a little bit. But at 5.5, he's not a bad option, so for me, he goes into optional pick. I'm not massively raving about him as much as he was decent last year. It's a bit of a step up to the Premier League. We'll see how he gets on. But he's not a terrible pick because of the fact that if you want to save some money, he could well be a starter and a penalty taker for Luton. Now, we've got Vladimir Coufal up next for West Ham United. Now, I'm not massively keen on the West Ham defence, I'll be honest, because they were quite leaky at points last season. They were flirting with relegation. But I still feel this guy's got stuff to give, and I think he's going to go in optional pick. Because although West Ham's fixtures aren't the best to start the season, they do have a decent chance of a clean sheet on game week 1 away to Bournemouth. And Coufal, on his day, can get attacking returns. Admittedly, he hasn't got that many minutes in the last season, and maybe that was because of some injuries. But generally, I think there was other players that came in, like Emerson, for instance. So I don't know whether or not he's nailed is a bit of a question mark. But if he is, then he could well get some attacking returns. And if West Ham can just shore up a bit more defensively, he comes in at an interesting price, to be honest. Like, when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, we don't mind that, to be fair. So yeah, Vladimir Coufal 4.5 could well be a bargain, but we just have to wait and see. An optional one for me there. Next up, Bernardo Silva. Now, Bernardo Silva in the 21-22 season actually did become a good FPL asset. He got some goals, went on a bit of run, and then kind of fizzled out, really. And then last season really wasn't much of an FPL pick, because you're picking other City players ahead of him, like Haaland, like Foden, like Stones, like these more explosive FPL assets from Man City. So Bernardo Silva is just a bit more of a creator, doesn't get those many attacking points, but he is still a decent option. And will we know he starts? Not 100%, but he could well be a starter on the right for City. And, we saw in the Community Shield that Foden was benched. So if you're a bit worried about minutes, maybe Bernardo Silva could get more, but I'm just not sure he's as much of an FPL asset. And this really kind of goes back to the discussion we had about Trossard. He could well be a good option, Bernardo Silva, but for me, he's a bit of a short-term pick, because if we know that he's starting, yeah, but he could be decent. However, long-term, I don't think he'll get as many attacking returns as some of the other players, like Erling Haaland or Alvarez. So I prefer Alvarez at the same price. I'm pretty sure they're coming at both 6.5. Although he's a forward, obviously, Alvarez, but Bernardo Silva, I think there's just better options at 6.5, like Mbuemo, like the Brighton midfielder, Kaoru Mitoma. So for me, Bernardo Silva comes in as a good pick, because ultimately there could be some assurance of minutes, and he is playing for one of the best teams, and he's a fantastic footballer. But as an FPL option, maybe he could be good, maybe, but for now, that's where he's sitting. Then we got Kenny Tete for Fulham. Now, Tete did actually score on the final day of last season at United. Didn't get many goals, but did rack up quite a few assists for Fulham. Now, with Kenny Tete, we're just not quite sure how Fulham are going to do. Will they have second season syndrome? Will they be defensively quite weak? Leno did make a lot of saves last year, but they didn't keep the most clean sheets. So with Kenny Tete, I think we've just got to be quite low in our expectations. He's not going to be an amazing FPL asset, hence why he's come in at 4.5 million, but I'm pretty sure he's going to play. So I think he's just kind of meh. He's all right. I'm going to put him as optional. I think there's going to be quite a lot of these optional ones, but he could well be a good asset later on in the season. Then we've got Philip Billing. I'm going to again go for optional, because although at times last season he actually did really well for Bournemouth, I just don't know if you'd want him from the get-go, to be honest, because Bournemouth's fixtures to start the season are pretty stinky, it's got to be said. So, yeah, Philip Billing certainly got potential, and at the price he's come in at 5.5, as I said, there's not too many nailed 5.5 midfielders, but Billing I think is going to be nailed. As I say, fixtures pretty bad: West Ham, Liverpool, Spurs, and Brentford and Chelsea to start the season. But when they get better fixtures, maybe around game week 8, they could be a bit more of an option. So Philip Billing, he's a wait and see for me, but an optional pick if you want to go for him. Next up, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, I think he goes into the same category as Mohamed Salah now. Now, as much as it's tempting to put him in essential, bear with people whilst I just get there, he's not quite essential for me just because of that price rise. Now, in previous years, we'd always say, oh, Trent and Salah, they're both essential picks. But with the way that Liverpool are acting now, they're just not keeping clean sheets. And for an 8 million defender, you need to have that assurances that there's going to be quite a few clean sheets. Of course, we don't know if Liverpool get better. You'd hope they would defensively, but in pre-season, they have been leaking goals. So it's a bit of a question mark with Trent Alexander-Arnold. And also, he has played a couple of games as a number 6. And we don't want to see that for Trent, because he's almost playing as a defensive midfielder. And we know we'd prefer him as a fullback who's inverted in that attacking midfield position, or even better probably actually, playing as that proper right back that he used to for Liverpool in that back four of old days, because then he could really whip in those crosses. And also, Szoboszlai's come in. Will he take some free kicks and some set pieces off him? It's possible, but maybe not. I don't know. He didn't take many corners in pre-season. Maybe that was just an experiment. We might not have to worry about that. But there's just something about it with Trent that, for me, he still has to be one of the best FPL picks. Even at that price, 8 million is steep, but it could very well be worth it. And we know, even with a bad fixture, Trent can pop up with an attack and return. That's why he's such an elite FPL asset. But a price that's quite pricey. We hope Liverpool get defensively better, and we hope that he plays in that attacking position. But next up, we've got Ruben Diaz. And for me, Ruben Diaz is a bit of a optional one. Now, as much as it's tempting to put him as a good pick, I just don't love him, because in previous years, alright, he gets some bonus points, but the last few seasons, he's not got many attacking returns, and at the price he comes in at, I think, to be honest, it's just worth going for another City defender over him. But, you know, it's not to be sniffed at, right? 5.5 million, still decent. In the past, we would never get a City defender that cheap. So it's not bad, and I think he would probably play most minutes. But, as I say, he's just a bit of a boring FPL pick. He'll probably just tick along with 6 points most weeks. So for me, goes in optional. Then, we've got Demarai Gray of Everton. Now, he didn't have a great FPL season last year, to be honest. It was much better in the season before that, in 21-22. Under Rafa Benitez, he really came alive and got quite a few goals. But yeah, last year, it just didn't go to plan, really, for him. But he did take some penalties, so maybe he could be on them, especially if Dominic Calvert-Lewin is not fit for certain games. And Demarai Gray, let's not forget that Demarai Gray does come in at quite a nice price. It's just whether or not he'll be a starter at week in, week out for Sean Dyche is a bit of a question mark. But 5.5, it's not too much of a big price, so it's not a massive risk to be taking. But again, I'm just not sure about his nailedness in that team, whether or not he'll play, whether or not he'll score the goals. So I'm going to put him as optional. Next up, we've got Dean Henderson. Now, of course, in the FPL game at the moment, he's actually a United player, but we imagine that he will make the move to Nottingham Forest, as is pictured with his shirt there. I think he actually could be really good if he does make the move, because he did pick up a lot of bonus points when he joined in the start of last season, and he was a decent asset. He made some saves from penalties. At the end of the day, Forest's fixtures to start the season are pretty bad. So right now, he goes in optional. As much as it's tempting to put him in bad, when the fixtures are better, he could well be an optional. It could be a good pick. So I think there's save point potential there. Let's just wait and see to see if he does move to Nottingham Forest from Manchester United. But if he does, then he could well be a decent option. Then we've got James Maddison. This one splits the FPL community, I think. It's a bit of an interesting one. But he has moved from Leicester to Tottenham. New system, new manager. Now, Ange Postecoglou, we'll have to see if he does really thrive under that management. And, he hasn't done a lot in pre-season. He's been quite quiet. But if he is playing that, write the theme tune, sing the theme tune, all set pieces, all free kicks, it could be decent. Obviously, penalties, if Harry Kane leaves, that is a big, obviously, factor. But he could well be on penalties if Harry Kane does leave. Or possibly Son Heung-min will be on them. But 7.5 million, he is a nice price, because it's quite a nice price point to move down if you need to. And yeah, he's a bit more nailed, Maddison, than Foden. So he is very tempting as an option. Spurs' fixtures, alright, they're not brilliant to start the season. Brentford and United, it's quite a tough first two. It's a similar kind of thing with Chelsea, but it's possibly a wait and see with Maddison. But I think we know how good he can be on his day as an FPL asset. So he goes into good pick there, alongside Raheem Sterling at a similar price. Next up, Saeed Benrahma of West Ham. Now, Benrahma actually had quite a good year last season, quite a good season for points. He actually was on penalties at one stage in the season, and of course took that penalty in the Conference League final. So he could be a big player. It's just I want to get a bit more assurance of starts with Benrahma. I think he has been a bit in and out of the team. And obviously had a much better season the season before when he was doing bits with Antonio. So Benrahma, alright, it's not a bad price. It's a bit of a price jump at 6 million, but I don't mind it. I think he's one of the better 6 million options. However, West Ham's fixtures to start the season are not that brilliant, to be honest. So I'm going to put him as optional. So then moving on to the next one, we've got Ben Chilwell. Now, a lot of people are really high on this guy because of his attacking threat. He's looked brilliant in pre-season, it's got to be said. Chelsea, obviously, last season were defensively awful, and Chilwell defensively wasn't brilliant, I'll be honest, when he played, and he didn't do amazing things FPL-wise. When people brought him in game week 28, had that home fixture to Everton, conceded 2, and didn't get any attacking returns, and just was a bit of a letdown. Obviously, got injured once again, like he usually does. So, yeah, Ben Chilwell is a bit of a wait and see, I think, for me, because I have to see how Chelsea do defensively, and Liverpool up first, not ideal for him, but maybe you could bench him in game week 1. But the ultimate thing is, for 5.5, he's one of the better options at that price point. So for me, he goes into good pick, because he's very tempting to put him in great pick, but I just want to wait and see with Chelsea, see how they are defensively. Next up, Marcus Rashford. There's no doubt that this guy goes into great pick, because he was a fantastic option in FPL last season. As I say, he's only 0.5 more than Bruno Fernandes at 9 million and Fernandes at 8.5. So he could well be worth that extra money. And it's going to be very, very difficult to go without him. But some people I've seen are doing that. So it's just whether or not you prefer Bruno, or you could even go with both of them. But we know how good he was. 17 goals last season was a fantastic FPL tally for him. And he could well be the talisman again. They have signed Rasmus Holland. I think it's Hoyland actually, but from Atalanta. So that could factor in to Rashford playing on the left again, which means he's probably a better FPL pick, to be honest. But ultimately, I still feel that 9 million, yeah, he could well be really good value. So he's going to be a really good pick, I think, across points in the season. So that's where he's going. Then we've got Calvert-Lewin, 6 million. Now, this guy's a walking injury. We talked about it with Chilwell, but this guy's even more. Just ever since that 20 to 21 season where he did really well for Everton under Carlo Ancelotti, he's really not had the fitness to get back to his best. So for me, as much as their fixtures are quite good, I think he's an optional. He's not quite a good pick at the moment. Because, of course, we know when he's on form, he can be a brilliant FPL pick. But he has had a lot of injuries, so we have to monitor his fitness. But fixtures for Everton, if Calvert-Lewin is fit and firing, then he could be a really nice cheat code at 6 million. He's obviously taken a price drop because of that lack of games, injuries, etc. So really intriguing option at 6 million. But for now, I'm not going there because he's just such an injury-prone player. Next up, Jared Bowen, very, very interesting at 7 million. Had a bit of a price drop after an amazing 21 to 22 season, where obviously he was going to get a price jump, but didn't quite perform on that last season. Had a couple of games where he looked back to his best, but generally wasn't that consistent across the season. So for me, he goes into a good pick. He's not quite a great pick, but he's certainly a very tempting option because at 7 million, that's a good price point. He's probably a little bit too expensive. If he was 6.5, he'd be in a lot more people's teams. And West Ham's fixtures, as I mentioned, aren't brilliant, but Bowen is their talisman. He's going to get the goals, as you saw in the Conference League final. So for me, he could be very tempting, but we have to see if he does what his potential could see. Then we next have Ollie Watkins. Now, Ollie Watkins, for me, was one of the best strikers to own last year. His consistency was really impressive, and he's so nailed in that Aston Villa strike team. Obviously, if he's going to get injured, then fair enough. Cameron Archer could get some minutes. But generally, there's not many Villa strikers in that side. So Watkins is so likely to play to the point where I'm going to put this guy as great pick. Now, it's a big statement that, but I think honestly he's one of the best forwards. And although the price point could put some people off, 8 million, I think it's quite a nice place to be, because with now Gabriel Jesus out injured, Watkins could well be the man to go for, and he may not be as much of a differential as he was at the start of the season launching. The game launching. So yeah, he could be a really good pick because ultimately he's pretty fixture proof. He tends to score against anyone. He's going to play. He's 8 million. As I say, a nice price point. You can always downgrade at any point if another striker, cheaper goes off. And also he's at a price point where you can get to the expensive ones like Jesus if he's fit, or Callum Wilson at 8 million, for instance. So yeah, really nice pick. And Villa's fixtures, they're okay. Not great first fixture, but then after that, not too bad. So Watkins, as I say, could well, doesn't matter if he does have hard fixtures, scores anyway. And it'll be hard to see if he can replicate that form that was really good last year, but he could well do it. So he's going as a great pick for me. Next up, we have Martin Ødegaard. Now, it's a controversial one, I think, this one, but I'm going to put him as a good pick. Not quite, for me, a really good pick. Not quite a great one, but as much as he was the best scoring FPL points in midfield for Arsenal last year, I just don't think he's going to replicate that. As much as he had much more goals in FPL last year, and I've got to give him credit for that, he was much more of an asset than he used to be, because generally he'd been the playmaker, he wasn't getting the goals, he was getting the assist, maybe the assist of the assist, and he was on free kicks, to be fair to him, but he just really upped his game in FPL with getting those goals last year. And at 8.5, I think he's a decent price, but generally I think at the same price you'd prefer Bukayo Saka, or even you'd probably prefer the explosiveness at 8 million of Martinelli, even though Martinelli's a bit more of a minutes risk. As we saw, obviously, in the Community Shield, Martinelli came off, Trossard came on, so there's always that factor with Martinelli. But if he starts most games, he could get more goals in 70 minutes than Ødegaard does in 90. And the only thing to factor in with Ødegaard is, with Havertz coming in, is it possible Ødegaard plays a bit deeper? Maybe, to support Declan Rice in that defensive midfield. If Havertz wants to go a bit further forward, that could be a bit, of a problem for Ødegaard's positioning. So that's the only thing to factor in. But I think Ødegaard generally is still a good asset to own with Arsenal's great fixtures, and possibly a differential you could go for. Then we've got Mason Mount. I think this comes into the same role really as Ødegaard, because although he had a very bad season last year, Mason Mount is still a very good FPL option. At his peak, he was really good for Chelsea. He just wasn't that last season. Ultimately, he's now moved to a new club, Manchester United. We'll have to see how he does. Ultimately, though, the one thing that's worrying is that he's been playing a bit deeper in pre-season. So he's been playing kind of a bit more as a workman in that midfield than Bruno Fernandes, who's been pushing a bit further forward. But the thing about his price, at 7 million, he could be a really good value if he starts getting attacking returns later in the season. So he could well be a good pick for that reason. Then we've got Marvelous Nakamba. He says he's an Aston Villa player, but right now he has made the move to Luton Town. Now for me, I'm just going to put him as optional. For me, it's just, I'm very much indifferent to this guy because, alright, yeah, for sure, he's a 4.5 midfielder that starts. But if you want to have that 5 midfield, you don't want to have this guy. If you've got a 4-4-2, he's probably one of the best 4.5s to own, so fair enough. But he's going to be on your bench most weeks, and the thing to note with Nakamba, as much as he's going to probably play every game, he's not going to get attacking returns. So just, watch out for that. He's not going to be as much of an asset as you might think. Then, Ashley Young. Now, it's funny actually, Ashley Young, because I thought he was going to leave Aston Villa and just hang up his boots. But somehow, he's decided to carry on, and he's now gone to Everton. So this is a bit of a FPL nostalgia, really, because, of course, he was so good in his time at United, and he's one of the few players in FPL to have played in defence, midfield, and attack in terms of how the game has classified him over the years. But no, of course, he is a defender at the moment for Everton. At 4.5, he could well be really good value. Now, he did actually score a goal in pre-season, and he was playing quite high up. Now, whether or not he does that regularly, whether he's, probably going to not start, he might be a backup player for Everton. But just wait and see with him. Wait and see if he is a starter. Because if he is, he could well do well. But for now, he's an optional. Because we just don't know if he's going to be getting the minutes that we want to. Next up, Connor Roberts. Now, I don't love this as an FPL pick because I think Burnley's fixtures to start the season are quite dodgy. But later on in the season, if Burnley have some nice run of fixtures, we know how attacking Connor Roberts can be. He did get some goals for them in the Championship last year. So I think this guy could be decent at 4.5. But for me, he's optional. Next up, Rico Henry. We know how good he was in FPL last season. And at 4.5, yet again, he provides very good value. When you can save 0.5 on Ben Mee, and Rico Henry is more attacking, really. I mean, Ben Mee can get some goals from set pieces, but Rico Henry, I just prefer the attacker from the fullback position. And he's very good. It looks good in pre-season, got a couple of assists. But wait and see with Rico, because I'm pretty sure he's got a bit of an injury doubt. So wait and see with him. But certainly, I think he goes into good pick with those nice fixtures for Everton. For Brentford, I should say. But yeah, wait and see with him a little bit. Then moving on, we've got next up Diogo Jota. Now, of course, this guy is a good pick because we know in the FPL past, he's really got a lot of goals. But it's a bit of a question, will he start? Because he comes in for Liverpool in midfield. It's been a reclassification of his FPL position. And he comes in at a quite interesting price, really, of 8 million. Because, at 7.5, you've got players like Cody Gakpo, who's changed to a forward. You've got Luis Diaz, who's possibly more nailed than Diogo Jota. But ultimately, right, with Liverpool, they've got a lot of players fighting for spots. We know Salah's nailed. We think Diaz is probably nailed. But then they have to pick one of Darwin Núñez, Jota. It's just a bit of a minefield with Gakpo as well. So we just don't know who's going to start. But if he's starting, 8 million midfielder could well be good value. So we'll have to see how he does. But he's certainly got potential to be a good FPL pick, Jota. Then we've got Emi Buendia. Now, I think a lot of people were sleeping on him last season. He didn't get loads of goals, but he popped up sometimes with some important attacking returns. And, in the past, he's just been a bit more of an assist of the assist at Norwich. But Aston Villa, recently, he's been playing quite well, scoring some goals in pre-season as well. So I think this guy is not quite good enough to be a good pick, but he's definitely up there with the optionals. He's definitely one to look at because Villa's fixtures, okay, they're not amazing, but they're not bad. And you'd probably prefer someone like Diaby or Watkins at Aston Villa. But to be honest, I think that's not a bad price for Emi Buendia. He could certainly be one that provides good value. Emi Buendia comes in at 6 million. As I say, the same as at Ben Rama. So very, very interesting one that, but maybe not for now. Then Ben White, for me, as much as this sounds crazy, an Arsenal defender who scored a lot of points last season, he comes in at optional. The reason he's so low is because of his price. And that's 5.5 million. And for me, that's just too pricey. When you can get Gabriel at 5 or, Zinchenko or Timber at 5, it's just not worth the extra 0.5. And we're not quite sure if he's going to be 100% nailed every single week with Timber there. Timber can play right back or he can play kind of centre back. He could even play in that kind of inverted fullback and come into midfield, Drury and Timber. But Ben White, as much as he got some attacking returns last year, which was a big surprise, I just don't think he'll be the one to own next season for that Arsenal defence. So that's why he's optional. But he could well be good if he's playing every single week and he's justifying that price tag. Then we've got Edouard. Now, I'm going to rush through these now because it's going to been a long video. So we're just going to make sure we get this one at a nice watchable time for you guys. So Edouard for Palace. Now, I think Edouard is a wait and see whether or not he starts every week. They've got Mateta there as well. But he could well be a good option. So I'm going to put him as an optional. I think Crystal Palace's fixtures aren't brilliant, to be honest. They're a bit up and down. But he could well be a really good option if he gets starts and he gets goals. Then we've got Matty Cash. Again, he's going to go in that optional pick because we have to wait and see if he is nailed, if he's going to be that right back. If they play Conte there because of Pau Torres, then that means Cash might not get many minutes. He didn't do that well in FPL last year, but at 4.5, he could well be good value, so he's optional. Then we got next up Harvey Barnes. Now, Harvey Barnes joining Newcastle. We'll have to wait and see how he gets on. But for me, I still believe this guy is a good pick. Now, I don't love always committing to new signings, but I think with this one, we know that he's a proven FPL asset, a bit like we talked about earlier with Maddison. Barnes is very good in the Premier League. He does waste a lot of chances though, so make sure you're patient enough to have him for that. But generally, I think he could do well in this Newcastle side. We'll have to wait and see if he's nailed to play every single minute, but a bit like with Jota, if he does play, we know we're going to get with him. He does score goals, so could be a good pick at 6.5. Then we've got Estupinian. For me, this guy goes straight in at great pick because he was fantastic in FPL last year, and ultimately, right, at 5.0, he is an absolute bargain. How he is not a 5.5 defender, I'm not quite sure. And although Brighton's fixtures do get worse after game week 3, I think this guy will be so key to own, at least for the first 3 weeks, because his ownership is very high. And if he goes off, which he did last season, remember, away to Arsenal, yes, I did have him. Unfortunately, though, he was on my bench for that bench boost. Sorry, not a bench boost, it was a double game week, but I had loads of double game week starters. He, of course, had a tricky double game week. Didn't people think that he was going to keep a clean sheet or he wasn't getting many attack returns at that point? But out of nowhere, the 17-pointer came away to Arsenal, of all places, and it was a big points haul, and that's what he's capable of. So he's definitely a great pick for that reason. Konate, I'm going to put him as good pick. I'm quite high on Konate this season, I can't lie, because if we get a situation where Trent is not providing that value at a price of 8 million, then it's a massive 3 million drop to Konate. And I think Konate is probably the preferred centre-back alongside Virgil van Dijk. And at 5.0 million, he could provide really good value. You look at Virgil van Dijk coming in the game. Obviously, he does seem to get more attacking returns than Konate. But you never know. Konate could come up for a header and get a goal. But yeah, ultimately, he is a million cheaper than Van Dijk. So he is that saving that could well be worth it if Liverpool sort out their defence. Then we got Eddie Nketiah. Now, he is going to be a good pick for me. Now, not an optional, just because I think there's more chance of him starting with the injury to Gabriel Jesus. We don't know he's going to start though, do we? We don't know it. But at points last season, Nketiah was really good value. When he was on the pitch, he was scoring goals. And by the way, I loved his song, D-Day. I think it was his rap name. That was a banger of a song, I can't lie. Can't remember what it's called, but it went viral. We think it was Nketiah at least. But generally, no, for an FPL sense, he was really good value. And at that price, right, okay, we don't know he's going to be nailed all season. But if he gets regular minutes for that Arsenal side, gets the goals that we want him to, at that price, he comes in at a very tempting price. Like, there's not many options in the cheap striker department, but Eddie Nketiah coming in could well do the business at 5.5. So watch out for him, especially early on in the season. Then we've got Zinchenko at 5.0. For me, he comes in as a good pick. Not quite a great pick, though, because I don't think he's quite as nailed as we all think. We've got Tierney still at the club. Of course, Zinchenko could go into midfield, which means he maybe gets more minutes with Tierney starting as well. But I just don't know if Zinchenko will start every single week, because they could even have a back four or have a defence where they have White, Gabriel and Timber alongside maybe someone like Saliba, right? So that could be an option if Timber then plays kind of almost right back and then goes into midfield at times to make up for what Zinchenko used to do last season going into midfield. So I still feel Zinchenko is not a bad option, right? But I prefer some other ones at the same price. So he's quite good, but I don't know if he's going to get as many attacking returns. Got only 1 goal last season, not too many assists other than the opening day away to Palace. Now, next up we've got a player from Sheffield United. It's Sander Berge. Now, you'll remember Sander Berge in that 2020 to 21 season for Sheffield United did do some goals, but I'm not sure. We have to wait and see if he's as good as he could be. To be honest, for Sheffield United in the Championship last year, he was pretty decent, and he does come in at a very tempting price of 5.0. So for me, he's not a terrible FPL pick. He will come in as optional, but it's just we have to see if he adapts back to life in the Premier League once again. Then Sancho. For me, Sancho is optional. The reason he's so low down is because I prefer other United picks, but if Sancho nails down a spot on that left, I mean, he could play on the right, actually. I say the left. Rashford probably now is going to play on the left with Højlund coming in. Not Haaland, Højlund. And ultimately, yes, Sancho, when he's on form, we know how good he was, right, for Dortmund. He's not really had that for Manchester United. It's been quite underwhelming. The price is okay, but let's not forget that Antony's also battling that spot. At 7 million, they're the same price. Let's see if Sancho can rediscover some of his form, but for now, he's optional. Then we've got Phil Foden. Phil Foden's a bit of a question mark because do we know he's going to start? Do we know he's going to do well? But I'm still going to put him in, I don't know. But the nailedness of minutes, we just don't have nailed minutes, do we? But on his day, he can be so explosive. He's kind of halfway between great and good. The great and the good. Go on then, I'll put him in great. It's a bit of a weird one because he's not a great FPL asset all the time. But just for his explosiveness alone, I'm going to put him there. Just because if he starts, it's a big if, but if he starts, this guy can do brilliant things. We know he's been the best young player in the Premier League for many years. One of the best, along with Saka, of course, and Rashford is quite young still. Other players still quite young. But ultimately, on his day, if he gets the minutes, it's a big if, but if he does do FPL wonders. He scored a hat-trick last season, if you remember, at home to United. He just has that potential of hauls. So watch out for him. But obviously, the Community Shield was not great reading because, of course, he started on the bench and then came on. So maybe Alvarez will start ahead of him with the leaving of Ilkay Gundogan and Mahrez. You'd hoped that Foden would be nailed. We just don't know if he will be. But if he starts, he could be gold dust. And ultimately, he has played some points in pre-season in that kind of Gundogan role where he's kind of playing a bit, as a creator, and he can get those goals. So he could be a decent one. That's why the potential is there, but maybe we need to see he's definitely nailed before we 100% call him a great pick. Next up, Richarlison comes in at 7.0, and for me, this guy comes in as a good pick. He's not quite a great pick. However, he could become a great pick if Harry Kane leaves, right? Because if Harry Kane leaves and Spurs don't sign another striker, this guy could be starting up front as a midfielder. He's been reclassified as a midfielder, which I guess kind of makes sense. It's a bit of an odd one, but I guess it was because Harry Kane was always starting, right, last year, and therefore Richarlison was coming on, wasn't always being that central player, so sometimes being as a wide forward. But generally, that price at 7 million is really tempting, and if Kane does leave, I think everyone's going to bring in Richarlison, as boring as it is. So he could really do really well and make a mockery of not just that price tag, but that reclassification to get the extra point for the goal and the assist and the clean sheet, for instance, as now a midfielder in the game could be a lovely one. So yeah, really, it's dependent on the Kane news. But let's see if he goes to Bayern. Let's see if he plays that first game away to Brentford, Harry Kane. Because it rests on basically him leaving to make Richarlison a good pick. But I think he will be, hopefully. If Kane stays, he could well still be a good pick. Could still get some minutes off the bench. But we think he'll be more nailed if Kane leaves. Now, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, for me, still goes an optional. I think there's a bit of hype about this guy, but I don't think it's justified because we don't know he's 100% starting week in, week out for Manchester United. Although the price of 4.5 is quite nice, he comes in at a very tempting option. And remember, only a few seasons ago, he was a 4.0 legend in that 18-19 season for Crystal Palace, and he did get attack and returns. For United, though, he's not quite got as many. And United, obviously, you prefer someone like Luke Shaw for a bit more expensive money. So I think it's not worth it, but he could well provide good value if someone like Luke Shaw got injured, for instance, and Wan-Bissaka was always starting. and he got the attacking returns that he has done in the past with Palace, he could well be a good option. But for me, right now, he's just quite low down on my list of United assets to go for. So optional at the moment. Then we got Robert Sanchez. I'm going to go for Robert Sanchez as a bad pick. As crazy as that sounds, right? Because, of course, Sanchez has come into the game as a Brighton player, is making the move to Chelsea, and now you think, oh, well, last season we saw that Robert Sanchez as an asset at the start of the season was really good. I actually owned him, got a lot of save points, 8 pointers, it was really good. And, of course, then left the club this season, has fallen out with De Zerbi. The writing was on the wall, really. But when it comes to this one, I look at it and think, ultimately, do we absolutely know that this guy is going to start? It's the same conversation with Kepa. We don't know who's going to start between the two of them. And Sanchez was so bad last season at points. He did have a few howlers. But ultimately, he could well not do well at Chelsea. And Chelsea, as I say, is a wait and see with their defence. So at 4.5, I think there's better options. And we don't know who's going to start. So for me, I would avoid Robert Sanchez. Next up, Elliot Anderson. For me, he's an optional pick. A little bit like Nakamba. It's just, I'm a bit indifferent to it. Now, it's a bit better with Anderson and Elliot Anderson because in pre-season, he's actually got some attacking returns. He's got some goals. And I apologise, sorry, people, for the length of this, but there's just so many FPL picks I wanted to talk about. So just bear with me. And hopefully, if you have really enjoyed it and you've just, let the FPL community know this is the long one, but I'm hoping every single second will be worth it. And, future videos on this channel will be a lot shorter. But I just felt I needed to do a bumper video to really start the season properly. So ultimately, yeah, Elliot Anderson, really nice option at that 4.5 midfield price, but only if you're in a 4-4-2. And also, he's not brilliant because even with him scoring some goals in pre-season, that doesn't mean with a Champions League Newcastle squad that he's going to start, because there's so many other players that are ahead of him in the pecking order, like Joe Linton, like Bruno Guimaraes, like Joe Willock, like probably even Sean Longstaff. So I just don't love it. And I don't think you would pick him unless you're going for a 4.5 midfielder in a 4-4-2. Next up, Leon Bailey. Yes, Leon Bailey is on this list as much as it's crazy to think. He was a troll at points last season. However, he wasn't as much of a troll as Pedro Neto. He's not even going to be on this list because of how much of a terrible FPL asset he was. But to be fair to Leon Bailey, as much as he was a troll at times, he did also score some goals. Now, he comes in this season at an interesting price. I mean, I say interesting. At this point, are we really going to pick him? Because Villa's fixtures away to Newcastle, not an easy start. But at 5.5 million, it just seems a bit too pricey for me to go for him. So I'm going to put him as a bad pick. I could well live to regret that when he starts scoring more goals. But I think it's just too pricey at that price. And Villa, obviously, they are going to play Europa Conference League, sorry. So whether Leon Bailey gets all the minutes, we just don't know. They've got other Villa players that are going to be brought in, like, Tielemans has come in. They're going to probably bring in other players. So it's just, I think there's better options at 5.5. Then we got Dalot. It's a similar conversation, really, with regards to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. You could argue maybe go into 5.0, into the good pick column because he's not a bad option. But just because we don't know in terms of who's going to start at right back for Manchester United, he's going the same as Wan-Bissaka. It's a wait and see. United's fixtures are quite good, but we just don't know if Dalot will start. And he did get his first goal last season for them, which is encouraging. But again, just don't know about minutes. Next up, we've got Yohan Wissa for Brentford. For me, he represents one of the best 6.0 forwards in the game. So for me, he goes into that good pick bracket. Now, I don't think he's an amazing pick. Don't get me wrong. He's not a brilliant player. But he still could be really good value at 6.0 because I think he's pretty nailed, has looked really good in pre-season and is actually playing further forward than his Brentford teammate Brian Mbeumo this season. Now, admittedly, Mbeumo is reclassified, not reclassified, but he's a midfielder, so he's got extra point for a goal. But when everyone's got Erling Haaland and they want that stacked midfield, maybe Wissa is the cheap forward to allow all of that to work. And it just makes sense because he's going to probably play. And someone like Ferguson or Calvert-Lewin, you're just not sure about minutes for them because of injuries or rotation. But Wissa's pretty confident. And also, Brentford's fixtures are pretty nice just to go off with. So I think ultimately this guy could be really good value. But he's not going to be a world beater at the same time. Next up, Pablo Fornals. For me, it's an optional one. I've never quite liked Pablo Fornals as an option. And he has popped up with goals at points. But for me, it's just not regular enough for him to be an option that we'd consider. did score a wonderful goal away to Bournemouth last year, and of course, guess who he's got first up? But I just don't know if he's going to start with Europa League, to factor in. Will he play every minute? We did get benched quite a lot last season, so I'm just not that loving it. But, you know, Fornals could well come in to be a really good option, because when you look at his price, that's the most eye-catching thing to talk about. At 5 million, he has taken a drop because of those lack of minutes. So watch out. If he does start regularly, he could be really, really nice. Then, mate, we've got another Chelsea transfer that's left after Mason Mount. Kai Havertz, gone to Arsenal, and I think it's just a wait and see with him. He could well be a really good pick at 7.5, but not for now. I think he's going in that good pick alongside the likes of Trossard and Ødegaard, because we don't know if he's going to play a bit further forward for Arsenal. Is he going to be playing as that number 8? Is he going to be playing to try and kind of replace Granit Xhaka at that position? We just don't quite know what his role is. And he did score some goals in pre-season. He also missed some absolute sitters, but that was just a fun game, a little training session kind of almost game that they did at the tournament. So it just don't read a lot into that. But 7.5, if we see Havertz playing further forward and picking up the goals that he has in pre-season, then he could be a nice option to save some money on that Arsenal Arsenal attack. But obviously he's a bit cheaper. There's a reason for that, because we just don't know about minutes. Will he play every single week? We'll have to see. Next up, we've got Botman. Now, for me, it's a big call, this, but I'm putting him as low down as optional pick. The reason he's not a bad pick is because, of course, we know how good Newcastle's defence was last season, and I don't think that they'll suddenly turn into a terrible defence. However, I do feel they'll get less clean sheets. But for me, he's no higher than optional, because I don't see why you would be putting him in your team right now, because Newcastle's fixtures are absolutely stonking. So bad. And yes, okay, it's a bit of a joke that he comes in at 4.5 when he got so many points last season in such a good defence. But he has no real attacking threat, to be honest. And he is at a position where he's actually quite highly owned, just by players that have also picked him and saw how many points he got last year, but not looked at the fixtures. And because of that, when he doesn't get those clean sheets, he will be sold and he will lose value. So why have a player at 4.5 that's just going to sit on your bench with bad fixtures and lose value? There's just no point. So I'd much rather get Botman in when Newcastle fixtures are getting better, and you can even get him at a lower price because he's going to probably drop when people have sold him. So it just makes way more sense to get him later, not now. But watch out, at 4.5 is a nice price. It could even be even cheaper. So yeah, not for now for me. Then Gibbs White, for me, I think Gibbs White could well be a good pick. I think he's in a similar kind of boat alongside someone like Johan Wissa, where at 6.0 could provide really good value. Now, obviously, Forest's fixtures to start the season are not a great viewing, to be honest. A lot of away sides facing their big six, the traditional big six teams, obviously not teams like Brighton or Newcastle who were in the top six last year, but generally big six clubs where you fancy Forest to get battered. So although Gibbs White was really good last year, obviously on penalties, was a talisman for them, I just don't think we're going to have him from the off. But he could well be a bench option if you're willing to do that, or he could well be a really good pick later on in the season. With a bit of uncertainty about Brennan Johnson, whether he could go to Brentford, I think Johnson he's not as central of a figure in FPL as Gibbs White is for this Forest side. Then Erling Haaland, we are going to do one thing very quickly, and that is put him in essential. It's as simple as that. I don't care that he's 40 million. I don't care that he's going to have a second season and people say, oh, well, what if he's having a flop of a season? What if he's not going to be as good as everyone saw in last season? Mate, this guy's a joke. He's an alien. Just don't do it. Back-to-back hat-trick. Is that not enough proof to show he's not going to be a one-season wonder? This guy is a joke. 36 goals and 14 million. I know it's a lot, but in the past, when Van Persie and Ronaldo were 14 million, they were still ripping up the game, and you were still putting him in their team then. So what's changed? You're still having to put this guy in because he is your perma-captain. Just sort out your captaincy. Job done. What a nice saving of a headache. So therefore, Haaland is essential. Now, Saka. Of course, Saka is a very good pick because he's nailed for that Arsenal team on penalties. What is not to like for Bukayo Saka? I mean, this guy, brilliant asset. And ultimately, the fact he's a bit more expensive than Martinelli, I do not mind, because ultimately he's more nailed and he's 8.5. I thought he was going to be at 9 or 9.5 after such a great season last year. He, for me, is a lock in my team. But very, very good pick. I would be very surprised if you didn't go with him because of how good Arsenal's fixtures are and how central Saka is to their attack. Now, Paqueta is next. He goes in the same bracket as Fornals and Benrahma does. Again, it's just wait and see. Will Paqueta get the minutes? He did get a few goals last season. Not too many, but a few. And he's not a bad price at 5.5. I'm pretty sure he is coming in at. So, look, at the end of the day, he could well be a good option, right? Paqueta, not bad at all. But, oh, he's actually 6 million. Nah, that makes it worse. That makes it even worse. He's the same price as Benrahma. If Benrahma's on penalties, you're always going to pick him. But, generally, Paqueta, he could come up with the odd goal. Just wait and see with him. Optional. Now, Ramsdale. For me, I'm putting Ramsdale as optional. And that is very low down, I admit. But the reason for that is I just don't love him as an FPL pick. Now, of course, he will get a lot of clean sheets. He will get some saves and save points. He will get some FPL points. But if you had to pick of all the Arsenal players to pick, you've got Trossard, you've got Ødegaard, you've got Zinchenko, you've got Saka, you've got Martinelli, you've got all these players. And they would all be above the pecking order, in my opinion, than Ramsdale. As much as Ramsdale's a good FPL pick sometimes and a solid goalkeeper, I just think 5 million is so much better spent in another part of the Arsenal defence and not Ramsdale. Now, of course, if we see some injuries, if we see anything else, then it could well be a factor. And the other thing to factor in is that David Raya has been linked with a move to Arsenal. So if that is the case, Ramsdale is not a great option to pick for your team. But we haven't heard anything yet. Ramsdale could still be number one. So he's still optional for me. But I just prefer other Arsenal players to fill your team than Ramsdale. Next up, we have got the next one, Reece James. For me, he is a bit of a troll. But he still somehow goes in the same as good pick. I know it's a crazy one to say he's a good player because he's just been a troll. But look, right, on his day, which is not often, he's often injured. But on his day, this guy is one of the most attacking defenders in the league. And he can come up with those massive hauls. Admittedly, 95% of the time, it's going to be pain. He's going to get injured. He's not going to get the attack returns we always think he can. But on his day, he's gold dust. So I'm very tempted to put him as optional just because of how bad he's been the last few years. But if he is fit and starting every week for that Pochettino side, he could be legendary. And at 5.5, great price, same as Chilwell, could be really good. But I'm not quite saying great pick because of the injury record and also the fact that Chelsea are a new defence. We'll have to see how good they are for clean sheets. Next up, we're going to try and go quicker now. Gabriel at 5.0, great option. Great option, I think. One of the most nailed Arsenal defenders. Got set-piece threat. Can't complain. Douglas Luiz, I think he comes in as an optional. Alongside Buendia, he actually could be quite good, Douglas Luiz. Did get a few goals last season. He's quite a cheap option as well. But generally, I think there's better 5.5s. I think that's the price he's come in as far as I'm aware. But I will just check that for you people. Yeah, he is that. So, yeah, there's better options. Ethan Pinnock, 4.5. Okay, not bad. But I do prefer the fullback to the centre-back. However, I'm still going to put him as good because he actually did come up with a few goals last season. At 4.5, he's still good value. But wait and see if someone like Nathan Collins takes his place. We'll have to see if he does get the minutes, Ethan Pinnock. Then we've got Tanguy and Ndombele. Again, I'm putting him as optional. Will he start every season, every single game for Spurs? We don't know, but it's possible for Ange Postecoglou, who said he might get some minutes. And also, he's your 4.5 midfielder, so don't overthink it. It's not that much of a massive thing. But the only thing that's a bad thing is you're taking up a Spurs spot. If Spurs are scoring goals, Richarlison, Maddison, Son, etc., even Kane if he stays, then you won't want to take up a Spurs spot with one of these. So, for instance, if you've got no Spurs players, then fair enough, you could have him as a 4.5 bench option. But right now, he's an optional. Now, we got next up, Eze. I think he comes in as a good pick. I really do like him at 6.0. Don't think he's essential, though, to be honest. I don't think he's essential because ultimately, Palace's fixtures aren't great, but at 6.0, he's one of the best. 6.5, I should say, not 6.0. He's one of the best 6.5s out there. He's looked great in pre-season, Eze, and he's explosive. The only problem I've got with Palace is that they've let go of Zaha. Elise looks like he's injured. So will Eze just have too much pressure on him to do everything himself? And will they just struggle generally, Palace? I don't know. But still, he's a very good asset, and he had a great end to the last season. So 6.5, very good pick, that one. Next up, Brennan Johnson. It's a bit of a dependent one on whether he gets a move to another club. But if he does do that, then I think he could be gold dust. But at the moment, I think you'd be picking Gibbs-White over him. So I wouldn't put Gibbs-White and Johnson in the same category for that reason. But if he goes to another club, at Brentford for instance, I think Brennan Johnson is at 6.0, so he's saving, or actually the same price, I think, possibly. So that's the thing. If you're going at the same price, you're probably going to be picking Gibbs-White when he's on the penalties, and that's an added factor. Yeah, so coming in, obviously, you've got to factor in that Johnson coming in, obviously, at 6.0 midfielder, so he's got a change of position. That's quite nice. But, at the same price as Gibbs-White, you're picking Gibbs-White. So let's see if he goes to another club, because if he does, then maybe he could become a better asset than Gibbs-White. But right now, he's optional. Next up, McAllister. Again, he's optional. I'm not going to say he's a bad pick, but he's just not as good as a pick I think he will be at last season as he was at Brighton, because I think he's going to play a bit deeper at Liverpool. Now, he could play on the right, possibly. Could support that Brighton attack, that Liverpool attacking midfield. But I think there's a chance he plays deeper, and he won't have penalties probably over Salah. He just won't be a central Liverpool asset to pick when you've got other players like Trent, Salah, Jota, Darwin. All these players I'd put ahead of McAllister. So, yeah, he's not a bad price at 6.0, but wait and see. I'm not sure he'll be that great. Gakpo, on the other hand, I think he comes in as a good pick. Not quite a great pick, though, because there is a chance of rotation. As I said, with someone like Trossard or someone like Havertz, we don't quite know how minutes are going to be. But if Gakpo is starting every single week, then yes, 7.5 is a fantastic price. And he's been reclassified as a forward, which is obviously not ideal. But I think ultimately it's quite nice when there's so many good midfield picks to have that nice forward option alongside Haaland. Gakpo could be a good one. Talking of Gakpo, we're going to get to another Liverpool attacker soon, Luis Diaz. But first up, Mitchell. I think Mitchell comes in as optional, but not quite a good pick, because Palace defence has been a bit hot and cold. I mean, I popped Johnston there for the same price as a good pick, but just because there's not many good 4.5s. Whereas I think there's maybe some better 4.5s than Mitchell, like your likes of Pau Torres. If Villa get loads of clean sheets, he could be really good. I mean, I know he's not got much goal threat or assist threat, Pau Torres, but he could still be decent. Also, I think someone like Mings is probably better than Mitchell, playing for a better defence. And if Botman is obviously having better fixtures, then he's a better option than Mitchell, because generally Newcastle's a better clean sheet chance than Palace. But Mitchell's still optional, because although he had not great amount of points last year, he can get some assists here and there. So watch out for Tyrick Mitchell. Next up, we've got Luis Diaz. I think he comes in as a good pick, because on his day, he can be electric. Now, it's a big on his day, because he was injured for a lot of last year, and that makes it a bit hard to think about him as a great asset. But to be honest, he comes in at 7.5. If we think that he's going to start, he could be better than Foden at the same price. So, like him. Then, we've got Cole Palmer. Now, the reason I've put Cole Palmer in is simply because he scored in the Community Shield. Whether or not it means anything, Guardiola, we know what he's like, and he could well not get minutes. But, maybe this is his breakout season. And at 5.0 million, he is probably one to watch. But for now, he's still optional. So I wouldn't put him in your teams now. As I say, we just don't know if he's going to be a nailed starter. But if he gets later on in the season, he's starting with the leaving of Mahrez, the leaving of Gundogan, he could well be a bargain to remember. Next up, we've gone for an interesting one of Carlos Vinicius. Now, I think with Mitrovic not going to probably play again for Fulham, this could well be a good moment for Vinicius. But Jimenez has now come in, so I still feel he's optional. I wouldn't say he's bad. Fulham's fixtures aren't great, as I mentioned, with Andreas, but I think he's still a 5.5 forward is, kind of interesting with Pedro and some other 5.5s like Morris. When you look at, the price of Vinicius, and you scroll in and to see what his price is, and you see that he's a bit cheaper at 5.0. There's not many great 5.0 forwards, but Vinicius could be one of them if he gets minutes alongside Jimenez. So I think he could be decent, but for now, he's optional, because not great fixtures for Fulham. Then Trafford for Burnley. I think Trafford, right as of now, is optional. Again, there's a lot of optionals, but generally I think he is interesting. Obviously made the double save in the final for the under-21s at England. Obviously, Burnley, new team, we'll have to see how they get on in this season. But if he's saving penalties, this guy could be decent value at 4.5. It's just, we'll have to see if the move from Man City to Burnley does work out, and it's just a wait and see, really. But I can't really say he's a bad pick based on he's got a lot of potential, and this guy has certainly had a lot of good praise. So he could be a decent save points magnet, and they're not going to be much of a good asset as someone like Pope when he was at Burnley, because Burnley are going to play a more possession football. They're not going to soak up pressure and maybe soak up as many shots, but I still feel he'll make some saves and do quite well for Burnley, but not quite the best 4.5 in my opinion. Next up, you're looking at it, it's going to be Cameron Archer. Now, Cameron Archer, I think, is one of the best 4.5 forwards in the game. So that for that reason, I don't think he's a bad pick, but it's just bench fodder. He's optional. I think ultimately, when you look at the Villa strikers, only Watkins really. I mean, there's Duran, but I call him that. He's not actually called that. But the Villa striker, like, he's not really got a lot of minutes for Aston Villa. So we'll see if he does. You know, later in the season, maybe he gets kind of drafted into the team. But right now, like, John Duran is just not playing minutes. And Cameron Archer was really good for Middlesbrough last year. So look, maybe Unai Emery will look at that and say, this guy deserves more minutes. But for a 4.5, I think he's one of the better options. Then we got Pedro Porro, differential. I think he comes in as a nice, good pick. As much as it's a bit risky to say that, because Spurs defensively have not been great for a long time, I think the attacking upside you get from Porro at 5.0, which is a good price, makes him a good pick. I don't think he's a brilliant pick because we have to see how Spurs adapt under Ange Postecoglou. But yeah, we're going to put him there. Martinelli. Martinelli's a tricky one because he's not necessarily 100% nailed, but I'm still going to put him in great pick. Because on his day, a bit like the argument with Phil Foden, on his day, he could be really, really good. So I've just put him in good pick. I didn't mean to do that, sorry. What I meant to do is put him in great pick. Because as with Foden, if Martinelli gets the minutes, he is explosive. And I think Martinelli's still in the first choice for Arsenal. He will start games. It's whether or not he gets subbed off early for the likes of, you know, Martinelli. For Trossard, for instance. We saw, obviously, that happen in the final of the Community Shield. And, of course, then Trossard scored, which doesn't help for Martinelli's chances. But I still feel Martinelli's probably going to play most games and start most games. So don't worry too much. Obviously, he's a bit of a rotation risk, but I still feel he's worth it, certainly at the start of the season when there's not Champions League football for Arsenal. So then later on, it could be a problem, but for the start at least, have Martinelli. He's very explosive. And he plays basically as the front forward pretty much for Arsenal. And if Jesus being out, I think Martinelli will be so central to their attack. Maybe Havertz will play there, maybe Trossard, but I think Martinelli will be quite far forward. And at 8 million, I'm willing to go there. Next up, we've got another midfielder. It is Kulusevski. I think he comes in at 7.0 and he's the same price as Richarlison, but I just prefer Richarlison at the moment because if we see that Kane leaves, Richarlison is just a bit more attacking and playing further forward than Kulusevski. Kulusevski, to be honest, was a really disappointing one last year. I actually had him for Game Week 1 of the last season. He was my differential pick in Game Week 1 and he was a legend. Got a goal, a couple of assists at home to Southampton. Like lovely, like 13-pointer, I think it was. Those are the kind of Game 1 differentials we love to see. But then after that, it didn't really get much better, and he just didn't get many good goals. Got kind of benched quite a few times. So yeah, look, ultimately, it wasn't great. But if he gets back to form, if he gets back to some goals and some assists, then maybe. But for now, he's just good. He's not any better than good, but also he's not that bad as an option. He has got goals in the past, previous seasons for Spurs. Maybe Postecoglou will get the best out of him and start him week in, week out, unlike what Conte did at Spurs. Now, looking at Darwin Núñez. Now, Darwin Núñez, for me, comes in as a good pick. But a good pick and nothing more. He's on the same level as Cody Gakpo because, yes, a lot of people getting gassed about Darwin, getting excited. He scored loads of goals in pre-season. It was against the second division German side. But on his day, of course, Darwin Núñez can be brilliant. But he also can be very, very, very wasteful. And he is a nice price at 7.5 because he's just that little saving on the likes of Watkins and Wilson. But we have to know if this guy is nailed. In the last pre-season for Liverpool, or the most recent one that I can remember, he was benched in their what looked like one of their first 11s. Maybe that's just resting him ahead of their game at home away to Chelsea. We just do not know who's going to start between Gakpo and Darwin. One of them will go off, of course, but it's a lottery to guess. So Darwin could well be that one that has a better season than last year. Hopefully he won't be as misfiring as he was last year, and he will just be a much better in his second season. But that price, too tempting to not be a good pick. Then we've got Elanga. I think he'll come in as optional because we don't know how he'll get on, obviously. But 5.0, he's definitely one to watch because I'm pretty sure last season he came in at a similar price for Manchester United and everyone was thinking, oh, this guy's decent. But obviously now it is a situation where rather than a bench option, he's actually going to probably be starting most weeks for Nottingham Forest. And 5.0 for Elanga starting is a very decent option. Could well be the next Andreas Pereira if he gets the attacking returns that he has done at times in his time at United. Now, moving on, we look at Sorry, I've forgotten his name. Perisic. For me, Perisic goes in bad pick. And I know you're going to say, why would you say that? But I was really disappointed by Perisic last year. And I much, much, much prefer Pedro Porro at 5.0. Now, Perisic, to be fair to him, is the same price. But there's talk of Perisic possibly leaving. And, yeah, okay, he's a decent attacking defender. But it just doesn't do it for me. I don't know, there's something about him. I just don't think he's a good FPL asset. That's why I've gone harsh on Perisic. Mitoma. For me, Mitoma goes in good. He's not quite amazing because obviously at the end of last season he did drop off. But I think actually Mitoma's right at the top of this good list. But he's got quite high ownership to the point where I don't want to go without him. But maybe I should have him in the great pick. I'm not sure. I think he's probably good though. He's a strong option for sure. But obviously he's a bit cheaper than we thought. He might come in at 7. Nope, 6.5. One of the best 6.5s in the game in my opinion. So therefore he's there. But yeah, maybe not quite great just because he tailed off at the end of last season. But I still feel he'll be the most nailed Brighton attacker and he'll get some goals. Then, Levi Colwill. Obviously, Levi Colwill at Chelsea now. 4.5 defender. Okay, whatever. We'll have to see if Chelsea are defensively good, but could be one of the better 4.5s if Chelsea sort their defence out. Then we've got Julian Alvarez. Now, Julian Alvarez is a wait and see regards to can he play the minutes. But if we know that this guy is starting week in, week out, he could be a cheat code. So for that reason, he's a good pick. But he's right at the bottom of the good picks because it depends on whether he's nailed. It's just the same conversation as someone like Foden. But, you know, with Alvarez, it's even more risky in my opinion because when does this guy start? Well, not that often. It's often he's benched and Haaland starts. But maybe Pep will change his mind this year and start Alvarez alongside Haaland more often. We'll have to wait and see. But until we know that, he just stays as a good pick and nothing more. But 6.5 could be a really good option as our forward. If we have a lack of starting City players and a lack of forwards, it's a nice cheap player. You know, the fact he's even cheaper than someone like Jackson or someone like Nkunku or someone like, you know, Watkins or Darwin. It's a bit of a cheat code if he's starting a City striker. Then Saliba. Now Saliba for me comes in at good. Not quite great. He's very close to being great in my view. But for me, I think he doesn't have as much goal threat as Gabriel. I just prefer Gabriel. He's more of a threat at set pieces. Now, I know that there's an argument with Saliba. He gets more bonus points. And obviously, he was injured for a bit of last season, so that doesn't reflect his score. But ultimately, I still prefer Gabriel. And I wouldn't want to double up on the Arsenal defence. So it's one of the two. And I prefer Gabriel to Saliba. So for that reason, they're not on an even pegging. They're just slightly better for Gabriel, from my view. That's what I'm saying. Then we've got Mudryk. I'm going to put him as good. I think it's a bit of a risk to say good because he's not really delivered. But in pre-season, he has looked better. He is a good player. We knew he was decent at Shakhtar. He was good. But 6.5 is a nice price. Let's wait and see on him. But he's got the potential to be a good pick. I could easily put him optional there, but I think he could be a really good pick because of what he's done in history with Shakhtar. Next up, Anthony. For me, I'm just not loving Anthony. I just don't think he's an explosive asset. You know, even his time at Ajax, I think it was, he wasn't amazing in my view. I just don't love him. I don't love him as an asset, and I've got the same problem with him as I did with Sancho. Right, 7.0. We don't know who's going to start. I think we're a bit more confident Mudryk will get some minutes, but Anthony and Sancho, who knows who it will be between them. Moving on, we've got another 4.5 defender for Brentford. This time it's Aaron Hickey. I think Aaron Hickey comes in as a nice, good pick this one because he's probably likely to start at right back or left back. Probably left back actually. This guy is a really good asset. You know, he came in last season, the Scottish right back. He can actually play on either flank, I think, but generally he's pretty nailed and he was really attacking and he was unlucky to not get more FPL points. So I think this year maybe could be his breakthrough season, but a great piece of value there at 4.5. Then we've got Enciso. Now Enciso for me, we know how good he was last season, right? And this is going to split the crowd, but I'm putting him as optional. And I know you're going to say that's risky. Why would you do that? Enciso's a baller. I know he is a great player, and I've put him Ramsdale alongside similar things like this, but I just don't love him because I'd pick Mitoma over him any day of the week. And I just said I don't love those 5.5 midfielders, so for me it's much more of a price point problem for this than a thing that Enciso's not a good player. I know he's a good player, but will he get reduced minutes as a young player for a team playing Europa League football, it's likely, it's possible. So, yeah, I honestly think that Enciso is not worth it. I'd just find someone else at 6 million or 6.5. But I could get proven wrong, of course. He's right at the top of the optional, so he's very, very close to being in that good section, but not quite for me in terms of minutes. I mean, I know that Darwin and Gakpo's got the same problem, but I think it's even more of a price point problem for the 5.5 Julio Enciso. Next up, we've got Willian. Now, Willian for me comes in as optional because although he was good last season, will he do it again? I just have to wait and see for me. I don't know if he can repeat it. He's getting old. Yeah, he could be alright, but I'm just not that confident in it. Now, João Pedro is slightly different for me for João Pedro versus Enciso. I'm going to put João Pedro in as a good pick. Now, the reason I'm not saying a great pick because he's a 5.5 forward that could be on penalties and is scoring goals in pre-season. This could allow you to have Haaland and Salah in your team if you have João Pedro. But the problem with this is that, again, with Brighton, it's a bit of a minefield. Who's going to start for them? And what I have noticed is that I put João Pedro ahead of Enciso and ahead of McAllister. So I put him in the same category as the likes of Eze, the likes of these 6.5s like Bernardo Silva and Solly March and Mitoma. So ultimately, I'm putting Pedro on that level playing field. That's a risk, of course, because Pedro could be just as much of a minutes risk as Enciso. But I feel that it's more, again, a price point thing. With the price point, you don't mind having a 5.5 forward because, ultimately, most people are going to have Haaland and you'll have a midfielder or a defender to come on for that forward if they don't play. Whereas if you've got, so many good midfield options, they're stacked. And you don't want one of those midfield options to come off your bench to be Enciso. Whereas Pedro, he's looked much better in pre-season, played more minutes, and there's a chance he gets minutes ahead of Welbeck, ahead of Undav. Undav's actually injured right now, which helps Pedro's chances, and Pedro's on penalties. I mean, it's not guarantees on pens, but right now he is. There could be Pascal Gross, we just don't know. So, yeah, exciting option. He's an enabler, 5.5, and as a Watford fan, I know him so much better than anyone else. He is a baller. He will do great things. Get him in your team if you're playing a 3 in forward line or a 3-5-2 even maybe. It could be a really good steal. Next up, we've got Malagusto. I think he comes in as optional just because until we know that Reece James is out injured, I don't think Malagusto will get minutes. But a 4.0 defender that could be starting for Chelsea and he gets attacking returns possibly could be a goldmine. Then we've got Ferguson. We've talked about the rotation at Brighton, but I still feel that Ferguson is good enough to go into a 6.0 good pick. Now, I do feel that Ferguson is actually more nailed than Pedro, but generally I still feel there's more rotation possible alongside those Brighton attackers. Now, I think Ferguson might start the season as a striker, but whether or not he'll get shared minutes with Europa League football to contend with, that's why he's not quite a great option for me, Ferguson. But we know, of course, Ferguson had a breakout season last year, was scoring goals, and this season could also be another breakout one. So he's definitely going to be a good pick, in my opinion, at some point when he gets minutes nailed on. Then we've got Divin Mubama. Now, Mubama at West Ham has looked really good in pre-season. He's a 4.5. Just have him. Honestly, he's the best 4.5, I think, because Moyes has come out and said that he thinks he'll get minutes and he'll use him this season. So what more do you want, right? Skamaka looking like he's going to leave. That reduces the West Ham options. Antonio obviously has had links with Saudi. He might stay, but even then, it's Antonio, Ings and Mubama. And if Moyes has come out and said that, there's a chance he plays, then it's brilliant. We haven't had that assurance from someone like Unai Emery about Archer, for instance. So I think Mubama, after his pre-season form and his possible minutes, is the best 4.5 forward if you're not playing free in the front line, because I wouldn't have Mubama as a starting player. Then Jason Steele, I'm putting him in optional. The reason I'm putting him this low down, despite his assist threat, yeah, he has got an assist in pre-season, is there's so much of a headache with the Brighton goalkeepers. Now, I think Steele actually will start in goal, but we just do not know when Verbruggen will suddenly come in and deputise for Brighton. So it's just a headache. And I just don't like Steele because I prefer Stupinian, and you don't want to double up on the Brighton defence because I say Brighton are more about the goals. If you're going to have an attacking Brighton defender, that's the Stupinian. You don't really want another Brighton defender in my view. So that's what's bumped him down. But still, he's optional. He could be one that works for your team. Then we've got Alejandro Garnacho. Now, I think I've actually replied to FPL's official tweet saying, who's the breakout star of FPL 23-24? I think it'll be this guy, just mainly because of the price, and I think he could make a mockery of it. So Alejandro Garnacho had actually quite a good season last year, but didn't get as many goals as I think he can do, and as much as he could really be a good asset in future FPL seasons. Now Garnacho, obviously, we'll have to wait and see. Will he get the minutes that we hope he does? But someone like Højlund has come in at 7 million, so someone like Højlund might be a better a third attacker to have after Fernandes and Rashford. But I think ultimately, right, with Garnacho at the helm in this team, at 5 million, there are some good 5 million defenders, not many 5 million good midfielders, and so for that reason he goes in as optional. But if he gets minutes, he could be gold dust, so watch out for him. Then we've got Justin Kluivert. Justin Kluivert could be a really good 5.0, similar kind of conversation to Garnacho. Let's see if he adapts well to life with Bournemouth, but he could really be a nice one. Then we've got Ben Mee. He comes in at 5.0. I still think he's a good pick. He's not as good as Henry or Pinnock because it's a bit of a saving, but there is goal threat there. If you're willing to pay the money, Ben Mee could still be a good FPL asset this season, and he's going to play. Dawson, do we know he's going to play every week? Well, with Nathan Collins leaving, probably, but I still feel that Wolves defence is still a bit too leaky, so I'm going to put him as optional. He's got some goal threat, of course, the Craig Dawson, but he sometimes scores own goals as well, and I just don't know how Wolves are going to do defensively. They have got problems with Jose Sarr, so it's not exactly ideal. Then we've got Pascal Gross. Now, Pascal Gross, I think, actually, is going to go in good. As much as that seems shocking, because in previous seasons he's not been a good FPL asset, but I think last season showed he could be really, really good again. But I still feel he's quite low at the bottom of those good picks, because I'd definitely prefer if Ferguson's playing him or Mitoma or someone else like Solly March. So yeah, I just don't think Gross is that attacking as an asset. If he's on pens, maybe it's a different question, but even though he's a decent option, I think the fact he's at the same price as those other good Brighton players makes it no debate. I think if he was at 6.0, maybe it would be a bit more of an argument. Then Johan Berg Gudmundsson for Burnley is an optional, but for me it's a bad pick, because as much as he's tempting, I think those days of good form they had previously at Burnley in the 17, 18, 18, 19 season, those days are over, right? Because I think that was a long time ago, and I don't think he's going to replicate that at the moment. Johan Berg Gudmundsson, will he start? We just don't know. They've got Anas Zaoury, they've got these players that can start ahead of him, so I'm just not loving it, to be honest. Chris Wood, the same thing goes. I think he's a bad FPL pick because, yes, okay, he's scored goals in the past for Burnley, and the odd goal for here for Newcastle. Maybe you think he'll start more games for Forest, but Awani is the number one striker, Taiwo Awani, so I still feel he's second fiddle. I don't know if he'll get many minutes. I still feel he's a sub player. You don't want a sub player, really. But it's interesting, I guess, his price. It's not the end of the world, right? Chris Wood, he has scored goals in the past, and he comes in at 5.0 as a forward. Again, I've talked about that with Vinicius. It's not that bad. But Forest's fixtures are so bad for so long, I'm just not loving Chris Wood. Then we've got Kevin De Bruyne. Now, Kevin De Bruyne, I think, comes in as a good pick, but in previous seasons, we'd always put him in that premium bracket as a great pick. For this season, though, I don't think he is. Even though he's come back from injury, I think there's just too much money you're spending there. There's other City players you'd want, like Haaland, like Stones, like Foden, where you can save so much money. And De Bruyne did score, obviously, a lot of goals in previous seasons, not as much last season. And, it has been on penalties in the past, but obviously now that's Erling Haaland. So I just think his appeal was lessened. And, didn't look great, actually, in the Community Shield with that penalty, smacking it on the crossbar. Don't know if that's, make up your mind, because he won't be on them anyway. But ultimately, I just don't feel De Bruyne is as much of an FPL asset as he used to be. As much as he could blow off and he could get good, I think I'll wait until that point. But he's still a good asset. Let's not deny his assist potential, and he's a fantastic footballer. Then, Wilson. We're going to speed through the rest of them. For me, Wilson comes in as a good pick, but nothing more, nothing less. I think he was getting goals last season, helped obviously FPL Guns Ali win the champion number one title for FPL last year. He picked him in double game week 36. He went off in double game week 36. He's on penalties. He's always pretty fixture proof, and he always does well in game week 1 is a general trend. So watch out for that. But not the best of fixtures to start off with. Aston Villa. Newcastle's fixtures, as I mentioned, are not great. And I prefer Wilson to Isak because I think Wilson's just more of a number one, more likely to start. Now, I think Isak will probably play, but he might be a bit more, not as central, playing on the left. So Wilson's the number one target man, and he's on penalties. Good asset. But 8 million is maybe a bit steep when those fixtures aren't great. Then Trippier. I'm going to put Trippier in another good pick. I can't put him as optional because, actually, no, tell you what, I'm going to put him as optional. I'm going to put him right at the top of optional, but with an asterisk that he could be essential later on when Newcastle's fixtures get better. But at 6.5, I think it's just a bit too pricey to start the season. But he could well be really good when he's on set pieces. Obviously, we know how good he was last year. But Newcastle will concede more, in my opinion. And I think, yeah, it's just too pricey. But let's not rule out Trippier. He could really be a really good asset when he's on form, on set pieces, with good fixtures, with chances of clean sheets. But for now, he's a bit of a, I'll wait and see. He's an optional. Then Harry Kane. Harry Kane is a bit of a question mark. Will he stay? Will he go? We just do not know. But if he stays, for me, this guy, there's no doubt in my mind that this guy, Harry Kane, is a great pick. Because he was amazing last season. Now, the thing about it is, obviously, it's a lot of money to spend. But we talked about that with Salah. I think Kane has been priced fairly. The same price as Salah sounds about right. Maybe he could have even been more close to Haaland with how he was only 9 points off what Haaland got. But I still feel that Kane, let's wait and see if he leaves or stays. If he stays, then of course he could be brilliant. But I still prefer spending a striker spot on Erling Haaland. And it's quite hard to have two expensive strikers because you make your team quite top heavy. So yeah, it could well be a nice differential. But I still wouldn't go without Haaland for the sake of Kane. So there, for that reason, he goes in great, but not quite essential. Moving on, we've got Bernd Leno. Now, Bernd Leno, for me, goes in as a good pick. I still feel he's actually optional, though, because the 4.5s, there are some nice 4.5s. I talked about Pickford. I talked about Johnston. I think they've got slightly better fixtures than Leno has. And I know Leno got a lot of save points last year. And if you've got a rotation goalkeeping pairing, then maybe you don't have to start Leno in the tough games. But Fulham's fixtures are just so bad that I'd prefer someone like Johnston or Pickford. And I'm just not too sure on Leno. So, yeah, not bad, but I prefer other goalkeepers. One thing to factor in, of course, is that Onana is not, one I've talked about yet, but he's going to be coming up when I kind of say it kind of separately. So just bear with that. But the other one as well as Onana is, of course, Højlund, who's now joined Manchester United at 7.0. He is tempting, but I think it's a wait and see. So let's just imagine I've got imaginary Højlund here, and he is going in the optional pick. He's not quite a good pick. Of course, he's got great pedigree, could do really well, could be the next big thing, but he's going in optional for now. I'd rather spend a bit more on Rashford and Fernandes. We know what they're going to do, whereas Højlund, not too much. Then Baldock, he comes in as a good pick, in my opinion, because I think he's probably the best 4.0 you can get. Now, obviously, Sheffield United will have to see whether or not they're a very good defence. If he is a very bad defence, then this will change to be being an optional or a bad pick. But I just think he's the best one. He's got a history of scoring goals for Sheffield United in that Lundstram season. What's not to love? I think he will start because Bogle is actually out injured now. So, yeah, lovely. Now, let's talk about Andre Onana. He's not here on my list for some reason. I thought I'd put him there, but bear with me about that. What we're going to say with Onana is I think he's the best goalkeeper in the game. So he's going straight into good pick. I can't quite put him in great because he's not delivered yet as an FPL asset, but I still feel he'll be good. And alongside the likes of Pickford and the likes of Johnston as the top goalkeeping picks, because he's going to get bonus points, he's going to pass out with his feet, and he's at 5.0, saves that money with Shaw. I just think it makes a lot of sense to go for him. Sorry this has been so long. I know it's been a bit of a long watch, but if you're still here, then you are an absolute legend of the channel. And I promise you, there won't be a long one like this again, unless it's like an end of season video, which we of course had a bit of a longer video. But yeah, Onana goes in as a good pick for me. Then we move on to Nathan Redmond. It's a wait and see. It's not a bad pick because we know Nathan Redmond can cut it at this level and he can score goals. Burnley's fixtures are not great to start the season, especially the first one. Although I say that, Redmond has actually got quite a good goal scoring record against Man City in his time at Southampton. But yeah, Redmond is a good player on his day. Obviously, he's had a season at Besiktas. Let's see if it's changed him or whatever. But Nathan Redmond, if he starts doing well at Burnley, then it could be an interesting budget option because Redmond comes into the game at an intriguing price, to be honest. A very intriguing price. Nathan Redmond, people, I can tell you, is priced at, yes, believe it or not, 5.0. I don't think he's been that cheap ever. So if he's really good, then it's a bargain. Then we've got Dunk. I think Dunk to me is still optional. Not good, but optional, because I prefer Stupinian, and I think for the same price, why would you get Dunk? Yes, okay, maybe more minutes, but Dunk doesn't get the same number of attacking returns he used to. And he gets the odd bonus point here and there, yeah, sure, but I'm not that keen on Lewis Dunk anymore as an FPL asset. Then we've got Areola. I think Areola is a good pick. He's not quite a great pick, though, because we're not 100% sure that he starts for West Ham. Obviously, he's a 4.0, so you'll leave him on his bench anyway. But at the end of the day, he's there. He could get minutes. Not a bad 4.0, probably the best one you could pick. It's just be wary that he could lose value if he doesn't start. So maybe you want to go another 4.0, but it's not that big of an issue. Then Son. Son, for me, comes in as, of course, a good pick. Not quite a great pick, though, because as much as Son in the past has been a premium that's always delivered, I think at that price point of 9.0, it's still an interesting price. If he delivers, then of course he'll go up to the great pick column. But I still feel that Son has a bit of a way to come back to the confidence he was, in previous seasons. That Golden Boot season, he was so good, so off it last year, and did get better at the end of the last season. But he needs to have a consistent one for me to put him back in the great list. So therefore, yeah, it could be a decent 9 million. Could make a mockery of that, a bit like Raheem Sterling. That's why he's in the same category. But I still feel that Son could be at the top of that good list. Now, moving on, we've got Matt Doherty. I think for me, he is an optional. Could do well at Wolves, obviously back where he was such a good asset at his original time. But obviously he's got on a bit, he's a bit older. Whether or not he'll be as good, we'll have to wait and see. 4.5, not getting any Wolves defenders for my FPL team at this point. But wait and see. Then, Sarabia, I think he's an optional. Let's see how good he is, because obviously he did score only one goal when he came in. I thought he was a really good signing at the time, but then he didn't really deliver. So I think Sarabia, if he's really going to deliver this season, then it could be a bargain, an absolute bargain. And Pablo Sarabia, we know he's got pedigree. He comes in at a very tempting price of 5 million in midfield. That might just be the best 5 million midfielder out there in terms of, we know how good Sarabia is for Spain. Really good asset. But wait and see for Wolves. Then Virgil van Dijk, I actually think he is a bit higher up than previous seasons. So Virgil van Dijk for me goes in the good column. The reason for that is, I think, although Liverpool's defence has been shaky, I've put Van Dijk alongside Konate here because I think Van Dijk, 6 million is a lot to pay for someone that's not necessarily getting many goals. He does get the odd goal from a set piece, but Liverpool defence has been bad, so we need to see a better defence from Liverpool before we invest in Van Dijk. But, right, he did score recently in pre-season, and he is a bit of a saving on Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, right? 0.5 saving on Robertson, and a whole 2 million on Trent. So I still feel he could be really nice, Van Dijk. Let's just see a bit more consistency, though, with his performances in FPL-wise before we invest. And now, we're getting to the home stretch now. John Stones, it's very simple for me. John Stones goes straight into good. He's not quite, for me, essential or great, because City defence for me is just a bit of a worry. They always find ways to concede in the last 10 minutes of games. And Stones at 5.5 is maybe a bit too expensive for me to go there. But I still think he could be one of the best around that price range, because he did get a goal in pre-season. Obviously, he's playing that inverted position in the midfield. So, yeah, don't mind it. But I just worry about City's defence. They just leak goals when, they've dominated games and they just don't have much pressure on it and they just give up. Then Pope. Now, Pope, for me, this season is optional. And I never thought I would say that, to be honest, because in the past, Pope's always been a brilliant FPL asset. But this year, I just think Nick Pope, I'm not loving it. I'm not loving it this year. I don't know why. I'm just not really loving it. And now I've got a fear that I'm not recording this, and this is a bit of a worry. Why is this not happening to me? Let's not do this. I've just done all this for all this time, and now you're doing this to me. Genuinely, just leave it out. Fuck's sake. You prick. You fucking prick. God's sake. This is a joke. What a joke. I did want a shorter video anyway, so that's fine. Fuck's sake, man. Leave it out, fam. Just leave it out. It's such a joke. No, I don't want Apple TV. Go away. Oh, so now you resume. I apologise for all the expletives. I really do. I really apologise for all the expletives. I'm really apologise so much. I apologise so much. I apologise so much. I didn't want you to hear that at all. I thought it had cancelled. I thought the video had ended. So I really apologise for that. That you've had to put yourself through that and watch that. But at least it's kept all the progress I'd made at the start of the video. So sorry about that, people. Yeah, John Stones, for that reason, City defence is just a bit all over the place. For me, he goes in as a bit of an optional. Sorry, a good pick, not an optional. I know we've just hit 2 hours and maybe my laptop just froze for a second and it's given up. So I really apologise for the bad language and for the frozen screen for a second. My computer stopped working, so that won't happen again. Hopefully these ones will be shorter in the future. I'm really sorry for that bad language. It's not like me, and it will never happen again. It was just out of frustration. That's all it was. Emotional. Yeah, you can never hear that again. Don't you worry. Next up, Martinez. Now Martinez for me is a really interesting pick, and I think he goes into good because in previous seasons he's actually been a really good pick for our FPL teams. Has Martinez. So he's going to go slotting in there. Now I know Villa's fixtures aren't brilliant to start the season, but I think he's one of the better FPL assets in terms of bonus points, save points, all that stuff. He does get a lot of that. So yeah, Martinez goes there. And then we've got Timber. Now Timber for me is optional because although he's going to be probably quite attacking, just wait and see how he fits into that Arsenal team. Bayer also goes in as optional. He's a 4.0 defender, whatever. Burnley's fixtures aren't great to start the season. Now Dominic Szoboszlai, I'm going to put as an optional. You can't actually see his face, which is a bit annoying. But he's a Leipzig player, that's why you can guess it's him. I think he's actually going to be one of the flops of the FPL season. It's a big call, I know. But I don't think he's going to be that goal scorer, really. He's just going to get the assist of the assist. He might take some set pieces, sure, but I don't think he's going to be brilliant. I'd much rather, at the same price, someone like Jared Bowen or someone like Raheem Sterling. Then we've got Destiny Udogie. Udogie, for me, will we see him start for Spurs? We'll have to see. But for now, he's a wait and see, so optional. But he could be really good value if he gets starts. Here, it's a Fiorentina player. It's cut off slightly, sorry. I think it's Fiorentina. But this is actually Igor. We were talking about the Brighton defender. So again, he's an optional one because he's not got much goal threat and he's just wait and see with him. Now, Jackson, that's the next one. Jackson, for me, goes in as a good pick. Not quite optional. Mostly, I would say these new boys go in as optional, but I'm going to say good because he's really impressed me in pre-season, what I've watched of him in the Premier League Summer Series. Now, whether or not he actually does score goals for Premier League, for Chelsea, we'll have to see, but I think he could be good. And yeah, 7 million's nice price. I mean, obviously, Nkunku's currently injured, that's why he's not on my tier list. If I had to put Nkunku anywhere, I'd put him in the same place as a good pick. And we're saying he's a good pick before he's even delivered. It's probably a bit risky, but I still feel he's looked good in pre-season. They're high caliber players. Surely they can't be another Timo Werner. I have to say again, I really apologise for the expletives. I'll try and appeal to YouTube. If this video gets taken down, I really do apologise. But yeah, sorry. But yeah, as I say with Jackson, then it was that's where we're putting him. And the last one is Moussa Diaby for Aston Villa. I think probably one of the best 6.5s there are out there. Really attacking option. But will it be enough to put me in good? Yes, it will. He is a good pick in my opinion, Moussa Diaby. But personally, I prefer someone like Kaoru Mitoma. So yeah, that is my tier list. The only people I've not done is Andre Onana and Rasmus Højlund. I'm pretty sure that I've missed out by accident. But as I said, with those two, I can tell you that right as of now, Højlund would be going in optional because I'll wait and see. We haven't seen any pre-season from him. And 7.0 is not bad, but wait and see with Højlund. And then he could really do well. I'm not saying he's a bad pick. I'm just saying let's see. And then good pick I'm putting in for Andre Onana. Actually, I'm going to say good, not great. for Andre Onana, because I don't think any goalkeeper that's not playing the Premier League can be a great pick in FPL until we've seen him play. But I think top of the good, Andre Onana, that's what we're going for. So I really apologise for that disruption, the swearing. It's not like me at all. I was frustrated. I was filming and I got what I thought was some really enjoyable content. I hope you have enjoyed. I know it's been a long one, but as I say, I apologise for that. Hopefully the YouTube, as I say, it was a mistake and I didn't mean it. It will never happen again. But I hope you have enjoyed FPL community, and it will be a lot shorter, I assure you, in future videos. This was just a final bumper video before the season starts. So I hope that has helped your FPL decision making. Haaland is essential. Salah's great pick. Son, a good pick. Optional Bird Leno. And bad, Kepa Arrizabalaga. I'll see you next time. Hope you have enjoyed. And I've been FPL Yellow Army. You've been legends for watching this long. I'll see you next time. Grab a like on it. And I'll see you later. Bye-bye.